Oh God, yeah.
Yes, you're good. You're good. You're good. Yeah, yeah. Your
No,
hair's
you've
done
got a
up
piece
right.
of
Your
argyle.
robes.
You got a piece of argyle on your face.
Ah,
Yes,
damn it.
yes. Mage, your makeup looks lovely, darling.
Yeah, it's fine. Your hat. It's fabulous, darling. It's fabulous.
Yes, darling, darling. Okay,
Darling.
welcome to Midweek Geek. I'm the old geek, as you all already know. If you're watching live, you'll certainly know anyway. If you're watching at a later date and have randomly discovered the channel, then yes, I'm the old geek. And this is my panel around me. I have with me Elfbait, Dark Knight of Hibernia,
Good morrow to you, sirs.
Mage's Musings,
Hello.
and Saxius.
Hello, everyone.
And we're here to talk wizards tonight. But before we do so, I'll give my regular shout out to everyone who's in chat, all excited. We've got Echo, Crafting Gamer, Grumpy Old Slan, RW Bishop.
And Hungar has just donated.
And Hungar is already dipping into his wallet. Hungar
Thank you,
Thank you, Hungar. Thank you, Hungar, indeed. And we are, for this stream, officially
Nerds!
Which is appropriate considering we're talking about the nerds of D&D, the wizards.
We are indeed. We are indeed.
My wizard last game did something that Saxius will be proud of, and I'll have to tell that when we go to the round table.
Yes, yes. But before we start, I always have a little bit of chatter before we start. Talking about games that we've been playing and running since we last spoke. Last Thursday, of course, was Shadow of the Demon Lord, and I will wait for Saxius to recap what we got up to in that. It's not for me to say, really, apart from we didn't know, did we? We didn't know. Hello, Halakar. Hello, Gene. Did I play? Yes, we played some MERP on Saturday. Went for an entire session of MERP, and I think every player rolled the dice about twice. That was it.
That was it?
The previous session had been almost all combat. Had been a pretty intense combat, and this was the aftermath when they're rebuilding the Forsaken Inn, which has been trashed by orcs, where they've been organizing its defenses, meeting people there, including Radagast, with it being Middle Earth, and then heading back into town to prepare for an expedition. And that was basically the session.
Nice.
And it was absolutely fine. It was absolutely fine. There's lots of role playing, lots of organizing, lots of downtime, lots of lore, lots of discussion, lots of planning, and you've got to have sessions like that from time to time, especially after one.
Yeah.
After one, which was basically the party plus all their allies versus a lot of orcs running battles, brutal battles. And then on Monday we played Odyssey.
Call of Cthulhu.
Odyssey of the Dragon Lords we played this week, which is a 5th edition scenario which one of my group is running through. It's been a little up and down, that adventure, and I think this week's session was considerably better than previous ones. It had started to get into the position where I was thinking this is very much a case of it's shuffling us from one big set piece combat to the next big set piece combat, and it's just it's pretty much in a straight line. But at least we've had a little bit of deviation from that now, which is that was all right. That was all right. Hello, Squirrel. Hello, Squirrel. Right, let's move around to Elfbait. Any games?
I did not get my Monday game, and that sucks. But I just wasn't feeling up for running. Did get a chance to actually play in my brother's campaign. I think a week ago, where I'm playing a wizard, which it's sort of on point. I'm playing a utility wizard, who so far has done more without the use of his spells than he has with his spells. In this particular game session, we were faced by a crazy wizard and a bunch of bandits led by a hobgoblin. And I managed to convince the hobgoblin that the crazy wizard was going to get him and his men killed and then negotiated. Here's the part that Saxius will like. I negotiated a parlay between the town and the bandits to have the bandits provide additional security throughout the harsh winter months, with full knowledge that spending a winter with the population would necessarily create an integration of some of the bandits into the populace, and therefore simultaneously diffuse the bandit problem in the area and enhance the town's capabilities overall. And then we did a kind of a downtime montage of the winter, and so I spent the winter facilitating the transition from and the integration of the bandits into town and stuff like that. So
Awesome.
That's that's all to do with it's the underlying logic of the world being brought into play.
Exactly, and when you have a wizard who has a high intelligence and high charisma, it was really useful. And my brother's like, I can't even get mad at you because you wrote about your character being this wizard who grew up on the streets of Waterdeep in a middle, kind of merchant class family. So you're used to doing negotiations and trade agreements and stuff like that.
Retainers are going to love you.
Squirrel Hermit.
It wasn't 5th edition, and retainers mattered more. But
yeah, I never.
Squirrel Hermit's being nice. Thank you, Squirrel Hermit. We are officially now awesome people.
So you're a ye old awesome person.
Yes.
Time to rebrand the channel.
Yes.
Dark Knight of awesome people.
Yes.
Awesome bait.
Awesome.
Awesome people's musings. I like the sound ring of that too.
We can't really use awesome people.
What would you be?
You'd be bastious. That's what it'd be. You'd be bastious.
I would be
Bastious.
Sauciest.
Of course, the Slaneshi cultist would say that. Of course he would.
Okay, DK, any games from you recently?
No, but I have some good news. My Lion and Dragon game will be starting up, and I'm making notes for my Amherst Swords and Wizardry Stonehell game for the IRL group and the online group that's going to start in about 2 weeks. So things. Yeah. I'm just kind of don't have the time to play games because I want to get these notes done because I've 7 levels of a dungeon and a region to write up and modules and the Ghoul Land. So yeah.
Yep. Mage?
We had OSE on Friday, which it still always boggles my mind how they love to run into combat knowing the odds are stacked against them and then wonder why they're getting killed so easily. But it's like, they're just kobolds. Yeah, well, there are 18 of them.
Oh, God. I played in an OSE game where I thought that, and then Aaron, the pedantic, threw the keep at us, which we have now since called the meat grinder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we lost so many people to that fucking thing.
You gotta play smart and you gotta negotiate. You gotta talk to the enemies and not rush into combat. So we also played my AD&D first ed game with Team Good, and they have one player down, so they've decided to build up alternate characters. Their backup characters.
Team Good has that dwarf, those rangers, and those paladins, right?
Yeah, Team Good normally has 2 paladins, a ranger, cleric of Timora. They have a dwarf fighter and a dwarf thief. Now, the cleric of Timora is the player who can't make it, so they decided, without the power, because he's 6th level now, without the powerhouse, let's build up our other guys. So now their team kind of good. Most of them are neutral, which consists of a monk, a chaotic neutral fighter cleric of Loki. Who else? They have a fighter mage thief. What else did they have? But anyway, the cleric of Loki bought it.
The good aligned cleric, is he just permanently gone, or is he just?
No, he's traveling for February, so that's why they're building up their backups.
Okay, so he'll be back basically. He's not quit the game.
No, not at all. They just continue playing the others if that were the case. So so they decided to hunt a colony of giant ants with their level 1 and 2 characters, and
That's
and
not wise.
it's not wise, but they did it well. They only had but one casualty. The cleric.
So the cleric bought it, yeah.
And on brand for today's stream, the new character he made up was a magic user.
Excellent.
He got an 18 intellect. He was very happy about that because he succeeded
on
all of his spell rolls. Yeah. Not bonus spells per se, but a greater number of starting spells.
Oh yeah, that's what I mean. It's like with clerics, they start with extra spells. So that was good times, and they have one more session before the other players back. So I'm gonna complete that, and then.
Any videos in the pipeline?
I'm working on them. I've decided that March 8th is my 1-year anniversary, so that's when I will start posting. Until then, I'm just going to put them together. Like I said last week, I've got my friend who wants to do the sound. I'm doing all the tableaus for about 4 of the recaps all at once, and those are time consuming because I got to recreate the situations that happened in game. So I've got about 500 photos done already, and then I have to sort them. So that's the time-consuming part for the recaps is recreating what happened, because I don't take them on the fly at the table. That would interrupt the game itself.
My channel's 2-year anniversary is going to be in 2 weeks' time. So
nice.
We'll think of something
just in time for the paladins, the rangers, and the barbarians. Nice.
Oh, we'll do something different that night. We'll do something different.
You can have another spice stream, or we watch you eat hot food.
I don't think so. Zach, just go on. Tell everyone about Shadow of the Demon Lord and everything else.
No idea. So the group had been tasked with acquiring a cleric, the blood of a virgin, and magical blood. Now they tried to unhorse the cleric when he rode into town. That didn't exactly work, but they then convinced him that he had to go and, save someone from damnation. So he went after a string of touch and go arguments. But he was then handed over to the group that the players were working for. We don't ask questions. We are 5-star henchmen in this group. Everyone simply does as they're told. We don't ask questions.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Hard.
Exactly. You had already acquired the blood of a believed to be virgin. Again, we don't ask questions how. That's not for the stream.
Certainly isn't. No.
No, because Shadow of the Demon Lord is filled with brutality and gore. And then it came down to acquiring magic blood, and the players having put their ears, or in John's case, his nose to the ground and gotten whiff of the local wizards going out to acquire spell components. They went out to basically start a negotiation. And what happened was the interaction between a high intelligent character and a low intelligent character, because certain words and phrases were used which caused the communication to almost escalate to fireballs being exchanged. Though
I wouldn't say exchanged. Fireballs sent in one direction.
Yeah. There would have been a number of fireballs that would have been sent at you. Though I think from the point of view of the players...
I didn't understand the difference between enchant and enthrall.
No.
Both are words that are far too long for a goblin.
I mean, to be fair, there's really not that much... all enthralling is enchantment. Not all enchantment is enthralling, I think.
No, but the way it was being communicated, it was being suggested that the goblins wanted to do certain things with the wizards. And as of such, there was a lot of hostility to begin with until the wizards did ESP and learned that the goblins were in servitude to a demon-worshipping cult. Though they had no clue that they were in a league with a demon-worshipping cult, they were just really eager after getting a cauldron made out of bronze, because John had licked the cauldron, and according to goblin law written upon the bark of the barn which they live in, it is customary and legal tender that he now owns the cauldron because he has licked it. this is the world we play in, and these are the
all
shenanigans.
we wanted that wizard to do, I tried to steal a chicken and got beaten up by a geriatric farmer.
Good.
So we went to a market and I bought a chicken. I then choked my chicken, as the whole point of that was to bring in
that pun. Yeah.
That pun has been brought in many times. I choked the chicken. We bled the chicken. I ate all the good bits, all the juicy giblets. I picked those out, so it was nice, smooth chicken blood.
Geek choked his chicken till there was blood, and then nobbled on the giblets.
Yes, and yep, exactly. And then
demonetized.
I'm sorry.
I just
I'm such a child.
Gave the bowl of blood to the wizard and wanted him to make it magic for us. That's all.
And the miscommunication happened. The players almost died.
That's when the miscommunication happened. Yes.
And the players almost died. Wizard found out that they were working for the evil, for the evil cult, and basically went, "I would like to hire you." And we went through an extended negotiation period where we came to the simple conclusion that John's character was the most illiterate goblin in the entire lot, and he could count to 3. So that made it really difficult for the wizard to offer them anything above 3, and he couldn't go beyond 3 in any circumstance. So he offered them 3 things of freeze, but that only confused the matter so much for the goblins that they had to basically go together, huddle, and basically discuss, like, if 3 things of free too much, or is it just free enough for the 3 of us? And that was sort of what was being discussed.
Orc mentality: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lots.
Yes. The players.
I mean, we're being paid 3 silver pieces, 3 chickens, and 3 meals a day. There we go. Excellent.
Yes. Wonderful negotiations by the players. The players were then basically told, your first task is to come over to my place, and sunrise, I will give you enchanted blood, and you will deliver that. The players did exactly as instructed, and they were also instructed to get out as soon as possible, which the players, I'm not gonna lie, you were almost tickled to stay. You found a hard time saying no to all of the goodies that the cult was trying to offer you, but you did get out, so you didn't get to see what the other wizard had done to sabotage their ritual. And you were then introduced to Awoken, which I don't remember which name you gave the character, but it is the soul of a child trapped inside of a giant golem ape, gorilla, and that this child will then, or this child, or childlike entity will help the players in their next mission, which is to go into one of the coal mines where a stone heart that is beating has been located.
And he's called Awakened, and the reason why he's called Awaken is because the wizard says he was stood there, and he basically said this clockwork is now awakened. So I went up to his face and went, "You're awakened? Hello, Awakened." And that was it. He became awakened.
Yep. Creativity of players when they're just given free reign to play characters with
and
such.
now he thinks he's called Awakened.
Exactly. Now he's just.
The wizard told us it was called Awakened.
I mean, that's far more creative than when in one of the games I played years ago, where they got a staff of the snake. It can turn into a snake. Do you know what they called the snake?
Sid?
Hissing? They called it gonorrhea.
No.
Why? I don't know. They just did.
It burns because it stings.
Probably. They probably just thought it'd be funny to have the DM every time they activated it. They say.
All right, now I gotta get in on this. Did they name it gonorrhea because it was a long wiggly thing that turned green?
Probably.
Oh,
I mean, I don't know, dude. I don't know. Like, I heard they got the staff of the snake. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then they gave the name to it. And I'm like,
so I have a question for the panel here.
Go for it.
if
Yes,
you
we
have
should kick DK off the island. No, I mean, no, go ahead.
Fuck you, because I was fucking leaving anyway.
if you have a group and their reaction to meeting a band of hobgoblins is to panic, thinking that the hobgoblins are going to be equal to a party of level 10, is that the sign of players thinking that they are still in a very deadly game? Or is that sign of me having traumatized my real life group to the point of where they don't know when they are safe?
Yes.
Good.
If it were anyone else but you, Saxius, I would say that is the sign of a smart player. If it's anyone playing in your game, you have traumatized them.
Good.
I need more data.
I had the players had to meet a ranger because I'm taking them through the Red Hand of Doom in 5th edition. They had to meet the local ranger, and he wasn't home. I rolled that he was out doing his work, and they met his wife instead. The players were dead certain it was a hack. They were convinced that the broth that they were being served was the intestines of people and all of these horrific things, and it was just a nice, homely lady. And the players eventually, like after 10 minutes of just staring at me, the DM, just going like, when is it going to drop? When is she going to turn around and just reach out and snap a neck? When are we going to be hit by 7 magic missiles and just blasted through the windows? It's like, no, she's serving you, homemade buns and giving you food, asking how you're doing, asking if you need any herbs for your feet because walking can do a lot of damage if you're not used to it, and so forth. Well,
Squirrel Bait, all Squirrel Hermit that'll do is just give me superpowers. So I'll just be an even worse terror.
So yeah.
You'll just give me psionics, and since none of you have them, you're all screwed. So
basically, the interaction of a wholesome, happy home family event just had the players going like this. This is not Saxius' games. Saxius will torment us. He's waiting for the right moment to stab us and all of these things. And when finally their guard was let down, that's when the ranger arrived, and that's when.
One question to you, Saxius, regarding Shadow of the Demon Lord, that game. Is it frustrating to you yet that we, both myself and Gingerbeard, appear to be untormentable?
No, because my goal in that campaign is not to torment you to the brink of
paranoia.
Yeah, exactly. Like in most games,
at the moment we're tormenting you, though, aren't we?
You are, but I'm having it. It's fun because you are catching me out, and in ways where I go like, okay, I now need to jump. To basically, I'm like a goalkeeper. Like I am on the defensive more times than what I should be admitting, but because I have my camera on, you see me sort of go in my reactions with everything, which only makes it more fun. So I'm enjoying it because it's also giving me a lot of it's like a whetstone. I got to sharpen the tool, the blade.
DK shaking his head disapprovingly.
Right.
Saxius, players come to your table to have fun.
Yes, and fun by knowing that I am out to get you, by challenging you, and ideally taking your character away.
That's not fun. That's called Stockholm syndrome.
We need to use
that
and
is
abuse
fun
the
to
fact
some
that
people, but
we need to use and abuse the fact that we have got the attention of 20 fine folk in chat at the moment, and actually get ourselves onto the topic of the stream. And tonight's topic is wizards, magic users, illusionists, sorcerers, and how they've been dealt with in various warlocks. Yes, how they've been dealt with in various versions of RPGs. Starting off, of course, as we always do with versions of D&D, how they've morphed and developed throughout the years, and what we think about them, and what we like about them, what we don't like about them, anything we change about them. So wizards is the theme of the evening. Arcane casters, as they're called in more modern parlance. Right, so inspiration for this particular class is fairly obvious, because
Fact.
looking at all the fiction and the myth of the past, I would say that only the warrior-based classes have more inspirational figures to help define them. I think the wizards very much come in second place here, because you've got, from fairy tales, the witches in the woods in Hansel and Gretel, Shakespeare, Macbeth with witches. You've got Merlin. You've got Gandalf, who was actually an immortal, but was presented as a wizard. And then, even at times of D&D, you had some of the more compelling characters during the D&D years were characters like Raistlin, with his weediness to begin with, and the way he then harnessed his power and became really powerful.
And of course, the OG D&D wizard, Mordenkainen.
Well, yeah. Well, of course, all those fine spells in early versions of D&D that were named after the wizards that they played, which made the wizards seem even more. It made them feel more appealing. So you've got your Mordenkainen, you've got Melf, you've got Tensor,
Elminster.
Elminster is a Greenwood thing. He's not one of the OG.
I know. I'm just trying to wind him up. Yeah, no, Big B.
He's key to the Forgotten Realms.
Melf as well.
Certain spell immunity.
Tensor.
Melf's magic missiles. Melf's,
I like the origin of
acid
Melf's
arrows.
Melf's acid arrow was that Gygax's son got tired of the
blowback from
nuclear
that was
a fireball.
That was the minute meteors that he.
That's
that
true.
was why that one was. Yeah, he wanted a more targeted attack with the acid arrows.
I forgot about minute meteors.
Yeah.
So
I don't blame him. I don't blame him. Like, Gygax would just go, "Oh yeah, you're right on top of the door." Splashback.
So, but they going right back to the early days. Wizards first appeared back in 1974 as magic users, alongside fighting men and clerics in those OD&D books. The spell lists as we see them were much shorter. They were never strong combatants. They were never supposed to be. But the spells had such short descriptions. They felt like they were more open to
interpretation.
Interpretation, and put them in the hands of the players. You came up with all manner of interesting outcomes. But I've not played OD&D. I've not played a wizard in OD&D. In fact, I don't know a lot. I've only glanced over the lists of spells that they had available to them, and I just saw that the text was generally a lot shorter, and a lot less codified. For me,
mechanically, they're pretty much the same. The Vancian system of learning and the lists were a lot of familiar elements, even though it was very truncated.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, the Vancian magic came straight out of the Jack Vance novels.
The Dying Earth. I brought him up earlier. Yep, I brought him up earlier.
And to this day, it's a system that remains,
although altered. Still, there's homage to it in the.
Yes.
It's not quite the same in the 5e or the new 1 D&D, but it's
not all that different in 5e. I mean, honestly,
it sort of is in that you prepare a list of spells and can use the slots as you desire, whereas in the traditional way, it's you assign them to a specific slot. You can't. There's no upcasting. Like you can't put a first level spell in a second level slot. You just can't do that. In 5e, you can.
Yeah. They've added more flexibility, but we'll come to 5e in a bit.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything, Shadow, about Raquel Welch. I do hope not.
Yep. She died. Just CTV posted an hour ago. She died
what was this?
today.
Who did?
Raquel Welch.
82. Yeah.
Oh.
A bit of a downer. Certainly Barbarello, I believe, will be many of our a film from many of our formative years.
I've never heard of the film, so I'm a bit.
Barbarella was Jane Fonda. I think Raquel Welch was.
Jane Fonda.
50 million
Fonda,
BC.
Yeah.
50 million BC
blimey,
was Raquel Welch.
Yeah, 50 million years BC. I've seen that one as well. I'm getting my films mixed up there. Jane Fonda, yeah. Raquel Welch was 50 million years BC. I've seen.
10,000 BC.
Not seen either of them for 40 years. Yeah, that's me getting confused. I don't watch a lot of films, but yeah, Raquel Welch. I was thinking Jane Fonda. But anyway, showing my lack of knowledge. So where was I?
We were talking about OD&D.
Yeah, I was going to zip straight onto AD&D. Because AD&D is the one I know. AD&D.
Yeah, I'll be the somewhat resident OD&D advocate because I'm reading through Sword and Wizardry, so
right, okay.
it's fairly close enough from what I've seen of the Three Little Brown booklets and some of the supplements that it's fairly faithful. Tweaked, but I'd say that was more for legal reasons than anything else. So, but the wizard spell lists in it are fairly, you've got the standard stuff in there, let's see here, charm person, detect magic, hold person, light, magic missile, sleep is there obviously, as is shield and read magic. Let's see here, what ones are missing? Yeah, interestingly enough though, for OD&D, haste does not aid you.
Because that guy got kind of figured out he wanted to punish people who abuse.
Yeah, yeah. Well, elves. It doesn't age elves in AD&D at all. But yeah, no. It just says in an area radius of 60 feet around you, around the point where the spell is targeted, as many as 24 creatures become able to move and attack at double normal speed, and it lasts for 30 minutes, and it's a 3rd level spell, and it has a range of 240 feet. So it's incredibly powerful. So when I saw that in the Swords and Wizardry version, I was like, that's powerful. Like that's insane. Doesn't the AD&D version give them like an AC bonus?
It might. I'm trying to think of offhand. For haste.
For haste, I can't even check Osric because Osric doesn't have the spell. Which, when I saw that, I was like, oh, that makes me sad. Oh well.
Just trying to share a picture. So just
something that's important to note, of course. I mean, even further back you go, is magic is a game changer. OD&D, yeah, you're saying that's powerful, but it has to be, because that's their trick. That's their thing. If you're only going to get your 1 or 2 spells a day, it's going to be good for the battlefield. Exactly. And you don't spam them. You use them in a calculator.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing where I kind of appreciate an AD&D, and even to a lesser extent OD&D, is the segmented combat, because like in the OD&D version, before it goes down into like the speed factor, you declare your spells. Like, you go declare spells. I think you check initiative, or no, you check morale, check initiative, declare spells. Then you go missile, movement, melee, and magic. And if the melee or missiles get to the magic user when they're casting their spells wasted.
Interrupted, yes.
Yeah. So the spell slot is wasted, the spell is wasted, and you've wasted your turn. Yeah. Whereas it's the same in Osric. It's just a bit more complicated in AD&D, which I appreciate.
That's why if you're a wizard, you hire shield bearers and you have them stand in front of you with pavés.
Yeah. That's what the fighter and the cleric are for. That is exactly what they're for.
That's what hirelings are for.
I mean, like if it's a very early stages of the game when you can't afford them, that's what the fighter and the cleric is for.
It sounds to me, I mean, with what you just said about Swords and Wizardry, and it sounds to me the concept of the magic user seemed to remain pretty static between OD&D, AD&D, and basic D&D. in that it was
Pretty much,
much.
Yeah.
Even
unarmored.
their spell advancement is very similar. The one thing I'll point out is different in by the book Moldvay and OSE. I don't know what it's like in Holmes. Is that magic users and elves, who you of course use the same list, they could only have in their books an equal number to what they could cast based on their level. Like you couldn't, as a wizard, collect an assembly of all the spells and then pick one. If you were a first level wizard and can cast only one spell per day, you could only have that one spell in your book. You couldn't expand it. And they changed that obviously when they got to Menser, the red box, where you could now assemble a wider variety and pick the one you want.
They've probably pulled that adaptation from AD&D in that sense, because in AD&D you could obviously you had a minimum number of spells you could learn per level and a maximum number of spells you could learn per level.
It's a bit more of a logical. It makes more sense to me. It would always bugged me that I have a spell book, but it can only have so many spells in it.
Yeah. Oh, I love the way the AD&D does it, but I wanted to. I mean, obviously we're on the topic. So I wanted to bring up the difference in because that threw me off when I started running OSE, and one of my players was arguing. It's like, no, you're doing it wrong. I'm doing it fine. And I looked. Oh, OSE is different. Okay, well, we're doing it my way anyway. But
I'm just asking
your
Squirrel.
wizard to suck? Okay.
Squirrel Hermit, do you mean? In first edition. Okay, so Nosric, that'll do.
So one thing about those early editions was very much the fact that the wizard had very few chances to use their magic, but when they did, typically it really counted.
They were the nuclear option.
It made magic much more. It made it feel more special, more devastating. And
even when it wasn't devastating, though, it was still like really
good.
Useful.
Really useful. The utility was there.
Yeah.
Like what I said in the cleric stream we did a while ago. At first level, never take magic missile. Never do it.
No.
That is when you get high enough in level. Take sleep, charm, or shield if you can.
If they're available to you.
Or protection from evil. Dear God, take protection from evil. Those spells are so good. Yeah, they're very good spells.
Last time I played any basic version of D&D, I rolled as my first level spell Hold Portal.
Yeah, that's really good.
It was useful if we were running away, basically.
And here's the other thing: it's like I was even someone on Aaron's Discord even pointed this out. I think it was Party, who actually pointed out that there are certain spells that. Not even like identify that are only useful when you're higher level when you get magic items.
Mm-hmm.
Like just don't ever prepare them. Don't ever prepare them unless you get to the stage where magic items become more common.
Even then, though, like you don't want to wait until you're level 5 and level 6 for learning identify. Like there are some spells that are actually worth getting early on, but as an investment for down the line, it's not that you're going to be using them in the lower levels, so you don't expend a spell slot for them. Sure. But you do want them as early as possible.
I'm not saying don't. Like if you can learn them, obviously, but just don't prepare them unless you're like, oh, there's a ton of treasure in there. Like you go into a dungeon, find a load of treasure, leave some of the magic items behind, and then you go and check and identify them when you're there, so you can save time.
Well, remember, with Identify in first edition, at least, you have to cast the spell within 1 hour per level of experience of coming across the item you want to identify.
Oh,
so
really?
You have to have it ready.
I did not know that.
The exception to that being like if you are 5th level and you only need a 4-hour recovery time to learn first level spells. Oh, we can find them. Everybody rush back to camp, rest your 4 hours, get your Identify, and then cast it. But it's a 1 hour per level of the caster. Otherwise, you lose the opportunity.
A lot of those little things were generally overlooked. I mean, I certainly, when I was playing in the 80s,
we would haul stuff back to town and then have it identified.
Mm-hmm.
And I completely ignored things like, for example, scrolls fading after a while, or I can also
I use that religiously.
I also
completely ignored it taking certain amounts of time to learn certain levels of spells. We always just said, if you get an 8 hours sleep, then you get up an hour or two before everyone else and learn your spells for the day. And looking back now, I would like to have tried to play it by the proper rules, but I don't know if my group would have had the patience with the bookkeeping involved, because obviously the bookkeeping would fall on the wizard themselves to know how long it would all take. And
I mean, there is a way to kind of circumvent it. Like the way I would do it is just say, okay, well, if it's based on the one who discovers them, you can have just a high-level wizard in town, and when you take it back to them, say, well, it's within the time frame of them discovering it. Have them cast it, but they'll just charge you for it. They'll just go, okay, well I'm going to charge you depending on what the item is. And if it's like, say, a +3 longsword, just say it'll cost you like 3,000 gold pieces.
That's what sages are for. And this is where Identify is immensely useful. See, a sage is hugely expensive. Sorry, it's my phone going off. Hugely expensive. And so Identify is a cheap alternative and an option for a field identification. That's the other thing. I mean, you might be on an expedition that's weeks, away from a town. So you want your wizard to have that. Now, if you're also doing long-term expeditions, you're going to be higher level anyway. But sages are extremely expensive. You're looking at a minimum of 100 to 200 gold pieces a day, and that's for one who knows his stuff. Sometimes they can take weeks. And in exchange for getting that information, that's the money sink. So in that context, having the chance of Identify, even a 20% chance for that first level wizard, is actually not too bad, because it's 100 gold and 20%, even though it's it's a little fiddly. And Gygax's intent was that you weren't just going to give out the information. You were either going to pay through the nose to get the information, or you were going to trial and error. You were going to just experiment with the stuff yourself.
Well, I think the gaming part of it was that's just all part of the game of it, was to make it to where you had to make those meaningful decisions in play. It's do you want to dip out of the dungeon and I'll go all the way back to town, or do you want to sit there and wave the sword around a few times and flank it against a few things? And
I think a lot depends on the style.
Shadow and Sun also pointed out that Identify lowers your strength to 6 after the spell is cast, and the spell components are not cheap.
It's actually con, not strength by 8.
Oh, is it Constitution?
Yeah. It's con by 8. Yeah. So that's
it recovers at a rate. It recovers at a rate of 1 point per day or week.
Per hour.
Per hour.
One per hour. But if you've then got 8 con and you cast this, you're out.
Then it knocks you out.
Oh yeah, you're just dead.
You are out. You are out.
You're dead.
It doesn't kill you. No, it doesn't kill you. It just knocks you out.
You go unconscious. Like, it's not a permanent stat reduction. It's you are exhausted to the point of where your body literally shuts you down.
I thought if any point that your stats drop to 0, you die.
You are right.
If they're permanent,
If it is a permanent reduction, because you've got to think of this logically. Your body has reached 0 con. That means that your body is exhausted to the point of where it gives up. Like, it forces a hard reset to your brain to just let you just make.
So you rebooted, basically. You had to reboot.
Yeah, and if that was a permanent one, that shutdown is the equivalent of a coma, a permanent coma you would have gone into. You're gone. You're not coming back out of that, because it's a temporary one. For 8 hours, you're probably going to be knocked out, and then you're going to wake up with your 8 constitution back and whatever knowledge you've gained. But just imagine for a wizard how unpleasant it is that every time you cast a spell, you black out for 8 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then the party draws stuff on your face, and it's all embarrassing.
Yeah, and they draw the penis on your forehead and little doodles in your spell book, and they fuck with your animal familiar, and it's the whole thing.
Let's go back to one thing that was being highlighted by Sean, and that is, the bookkeeping that's going to be involved in this. Because as a wizard, wizards as a class has a certain expectation to them. Especially when we're looking at the AD&D older edition OSR style, as a wizard, you are going to be, you're not going to be at the front line, doing a lot of combat, but your spells are going to have a major importance. You, as a player, the individual, the real life person sitting there, are expected to have some brains when you play this character. You need to have the foresight and the utility and the imagination of taking the spells and applying them in ways that are beneficial for the group and beneficial for whatever situation you're in. That is actually something that I often bring out for players who say, "I just want to be a wizard." It's like
I just want to fling fireballs.
Okay, fine. If you want to be a fireball, fine. You can be a battle mage. You only focus on combat. That's fine, but you have to understand.
Be an elf, be a fighter mage elf thing or whatever. That's what they do.
There's just if you're gonna go down for the whole destructive side of it, it's fine, but you really have to understand the idea of area of effects, how certain spells are gonna have compounded impacts upon the environment and the enemies, and some enemies just will not care about what you cast upon them. I mean, wonderful example is I had a helmed horror, show up in my 2nd edition game, and one of the players just got out his rod of lightning and immediately fired a lightning bolt at it, but it just stood in it, absorbed it, because it's straight up immune to that spell, to any electricity. So he wasted a charge from his magical item, and he learned there and then that, I should have stopped and asked the DM if I could roll my intelligence if I knew what it was, because that's what happened later in that combat. As another player said, I want to roll to see if I know what it is. And then there you go. And it's like, oh, shit.
One thing I wanted to come to regarding all the memorizing of spells and the limitations on certain spells is it's clear that a lot of that sort of stuff was written for the basic premise of the game, whereby a party would meet up in town, go out to a dungeon, roam around the dungeon, and come back after a session with whatever loot they'd found. Which is a lot of how the game was played originally. What certainly made it difficult for me as a teenager to reconcile those sort of rules with the games we were playing is I almost always ran modules when I was in my teens, and very few of the modules we used had any means of supporting that type of play. Imagine playing it. How would you run against the cult of the reptile god, if anyone knows that adventure?
But that's a long-term game. It's not like something you can run. I guess you theoretically could run it as a one-shot, but you'd really have to trim the hell out of it.
Well, yeah, it's funny because that's one of those ones that's really more of a story-based adventure.
Yeah,
rather
but
than
those are the type of adventures.
Yeah.
Those are the type of adventures I almost always ran in my teens. So that's the style of game where you're just going into a dungeon and coming back. I've never really run that type of game. I'd love to, but it's just never fallen to run that type of game. So all those rules about you have to cast Identify within this amount of time, your scrolls will fade, it takes all this extra time to prepare your spells or whatever. They were always quite difficult to reconcile with the way we were playing the game.
You have to have a very Gygaxian dungeon for that to work, really, if you think about it. Because even some of the dungeons, not the story plot based ones. You take like Lost Caverns of Sojcanth, right? There's not like there's exits in and out of that dungeon everywhere like you would expect with one of the archetypical Gygaxian dungeons, where you might have
the Jakid.
No. The Jaquaized dungeons are different than a Gygaxian dungeon. They can be one and the same, but a Gygaxian dungeon tends to have shortcuts to lower levels interspersed throughout the dungeon. Or
ways back up.
Well, it's just like you might have that sloping passage there, which is why you have dwarves who can detect the subtle slopes that skips level 2 and takes you all the way down to level 3, or you might have that pit that goes down from level 1 to level 5. Those are your quick ways in and out, and the type of play that John's talking about there really only works if you have those quick ins and outs, or you get up to a point where you can teleport and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and I can't say I've ever played certainly face-to-face AD&D with people who care for the bookkeeping side of it. And I see Shadow and Sons talking about spell components, which of course are major, something I've always wanted my players to dive into and grasp and bring into the game. If I was running a wizard, and I've never played an AD&D wizard. Never. I've played so few games of AD&D where I'm a player. I've been almost the eternal DM with AD&D games. Now I would dive into it, and I would have a pouch for this, a pouch for that, and I would have it detailed on my character sheet how many pinches of spider legs I'd got, or how many feathers I was carrying, and I'd have one pouch for that and one pouch, and I'd make a point of buying these things when I was in town, or picking them up.
Spending time while you're camping and stuff like that.
Exactly. But I would get into I'd enjoy getting into all of that. But the players certainly recently, the group I played with, they weren't into that at all. No matter how much I tried to shove it all on them.
It makes the most sense. I mean, it makes the most sense. It almost gives that kind of, when you exacerbate that, it kind of goes into what I think a wizard is like a mad scientist, or like wizards typically are very rarely, in the fiction from what I've seen, are very rarely the good guys. They've all got the best. They're kind of neutral in morality. They've got this kind of sinister bent to them. So having like this weird dude in strange robes is poring over like insect legs or bits of brain or the heart of like that looks kind of familiar to certain humanoids. You know, it kind of gives this kind of.
No,
I remember
they're the nerd. They're the guy who's into weird stuff that nobody else really thinks.
Yeah,
is
and they're
cool.
just collecting humanoid hands. I actually had a player. In Aaron's in the game where the Kobold Keep was, where a mage would literally like tried to charm a villager, and it failed, and he tried to kill the dude. He succeeded and chopped his hands off, and I'm like, what the fuck are you gonna do with that?
Bounties.
Never answered. He never answered. It's like, Jesus Christ, dude! And you keep saying you're neutral.
The crawling claws come from.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah, but the dude wasn't no necromancer. He was just a 9 intelligence wizard. But like, god damn, he
does
did
not
some
have to be a
pretty.
necromancer to engage in necromancy.
True.
What Halakar says here is the sort of thing I would like to go into personally. This is how I would.
Player
like to approach it.
oil cloth pouches.
Again, but this is down to like what you want out of the game. If you're looking at resource management, where there is like, there's going to be a purpose to why you're doing resource management outside of just keep a track on it. There's going to be a purpose to it. Example: if you are out at the forefront wastelands where you are only going to have supplies come into your town once every 2 weeks. Well, at this point, it's not like you could just be saying things like, "Oh, can we pick these things up?" You would have to go out and acquire all these components, because now the resource management and the ability for you to cast these spells, it's actually a paramount thing to keep on top of.
Yeah.
Because it's the same thing for when you do horror games. Limited resources creates a form of concern, and then the enemy, the world, the environment, whatever it is that you're facing at that point, is something that's going to try and drain you down, and you want to conserve as much as possible. So again, keep a point to it. And I've tried to enforce the whole spell components things. I just find that in the current pool of players that I dip into, I just get player revolts. Just straight up they go, all right, you can have that game. It's just, it will not be with us as an entire group. We will not do it.
I mean, I will say with that particular group, they got there was one player whose idea of having a 3rd level wizard meant he could just now learn more magic missiles, and that was it. And all he was interested in was magic missiles.
I was never going to miss.
I am Scorchy here. This is Ross from my Monday night group. Though Ross hasn't played 1st edition beyond one session.
Before we get into this,
Yeah.
Before you go into what you're about to say with first, because I know you're about to say it's best to play in first edition. What we have to ask is, what does he mean by best? Does he mean what's the most fun, what's the best conducive gameplay, or what's the most powerful? Because that's a very key distinction. 'Cause
No,
if you're talking about
the
raw
question,
power,
the question is, in your opinion, meaning it is for
Oh,
us
right.
to decide what it is that's the best. Please continue, John.
Frame your own context, DK,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
tell us what you think is best. Yeah.
Anyway, so Ross is new to role playing games. So far, he's played in a 5th edition campaign as a ranger and then a cleric, and he's playing in a MERP game as well. I don't think he's played anything else yet, apart from one session of Treasure Hunt where they're all level 0 without classes. So he hasn't experienced an early D&D wizard at all yet. I'm gonna say I like AD&D wizards, whether it be first edition, whether it be second edition, because I like the idea of the way they start out as this fragile individual scrabbling for knowledge, and as they gain the knowledge, thus the party dynamics shift to one whereby the wizard really becomes the engine of the party, a protect at all costs type. But the way I tend to DM when I've got wizards in the party, I mean, I like to drop a few magic items in there for a wizard to play around with, to give them something to be interested in. I mean, I'm the sort of DM who will allow a wand of magic missiles with 5 or 6 charges, so they have to be judicious about it. But so the wizard can feel a bit more involved and thus have other spell, and then think about having other spells.
is there a way for them to? Is there a way for, like, with the charges? Is there a way for when you identify them that it reveals how many charges they have, or do they not know?
Yeah, you got to cast identify and grind up a luck stone.
Really?
Yeah.
Ugh.
Nobody I know has ever know that they got a luck stone, or we're not sacrificing. We're keeping this luck stone. It's too valuable. You don't grind it up just to find out how many charges you got.
Okay. I'm just curious.
That's in first ed. Other editions might be different.
Right.
It's a in second edition they rolled a lot of things into the identifier. So you had your percentile roll, then there was a percentile, of just like generating an idea of how many charges that something would have, but it wasn't exactly inaccurate. It was more of this one has got between 1 and 5, and this one's got, if it's a higher up, it's got between this and that way. So it was a vagueness to it, though. In my experience, most GMs agree that if you pass the identify, because you're going to have as many ways of identifying things as you've got levels, which I usually just sort of will take off one of the identifications for the exact amount of charges, and then that's a sacrifice that the player then makes in exchange for we might not be able to cover all of the items, but we'll be able to then figure out more information. Do you want to go wide or do you want to go deep?
Right. So Elf Bates, just to bring it back to what we were talking about, Elf Bait, in your opinion, what is the best edition for wizards? As Scorchy asked earlier, what's your take on it?
I don't know. They offer different things. It's different styles of play. I'm not that guy.
Oh no, that's fine. I know. I
appreciate things for what they are, not what they could be. I mean, 5th edition is great in that it really allows you to play a wizard and not get bogged down in a lot of the fiddly stuff. Well, beyond dying, it allows you to play a wizard and still have the feel of playing a wizard like you did in the old style ones. It just wipes away all of the stuff that usually got hand waved by people who are playing anyways. I mean, if you're not wanting that kind of game, then don't play 5th edition or play it with the optional rules if you can get somebody, because all of that's still in there. You can say, okay, we have no spell foci. That's not working. You don't get that. You have to have components. Yeah,
Yeah.
And they still do. They do still require components for anything that's expendable. That has a cash value. So, but yeah, I don't have a favorite in that. I've not played enough Wizards to really have formed that much of an opinion. But I'm also just not that guy.
Well, all the wizards and all the systems suit the system and the intent of the system. Like old school AD&D and basic and whatnot, the idea was you were challenging the player, not the class. And so the wizard, the person running the wizard, understood that at first level they had their one go, and they weren't going to go Nova at the first combat, which is what most 5e players do. They'll just unload everything at first combat because they can just long rest, get it all back. But a first ed and AD and in old school, you were thinking, you were solving the puzzles. The spell you had ready to go was just one little thing in your toolbox, but you were the one solving the puzzles and interacting with the other players. And so the system reflects that. And whereas with the modern system, with 5th edition, it's designed around the complaints that, I only had one spell and now I'm useless. Well, no, you're not useless now. You have unlimited cantrips and you have versatility in that you can cast whatever spell you've prepped instead of memorizing the specific spell. And so that system is designed around that concept. So it's hard to answer from that question because I don't hate what 5th ed has to offer. I have some house rules that I've done for my 5th ed wizards to more old school it, but I didn't rewrite the whole class. But I love AD&D wizards for a variety of reasons too, especially in context of an AD&D game, and just how strong they are and can be, and how much of a game changer Magic is. That's the important thing. Magic in old school is a game changer. That one spell could save or kill your entire party.
Yeah, I mean, even a spell like Dispel Magic in AD&D is so potent.
He is nuts.
Yeah. One thing, it's about the idea that it's certainly in AD&D and basic D&D, the idea of combat balance just did not exist.
It was immaterial.
Well, no. There was.
No.
There was a no. What I mean is there was no. You're thinking I'm saying that all the classes were equal. What I mean is they balanced each other out.
They had their own niche.
They had their utility, but it wasn't.
What we're saying is the system itself isn't the system in general, and the game itself as a whole there was no pretense of balance.
No. You could be running into a dragon at level 2. If you're
some of those level 1 encounters are a pack of ghouls. Come on, and that's not even a random encounter. That's a planned encounter or 2 whites.
Yeah,
I will say,
to be fair on that, the DMG based the monsters not on character levels, but on the levels in the dungeon. No, go read the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Oh yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
So
but even still, though, there's always the possibility of non-level
wilderness.
No, even in a dungeon, non-level monsters appearing on other levels than they're supposed to be. That's why you had those like 2d6 in random encounter tables, so you could have that wonderful curve.
Right.
So.
But I will say, if I were to answer what is best, again, it goes back to what I'm saying. If you're looking for raw power and consistent damage or consistent utility, I would say go for 5th edition. Unequivocally, if you put a 5e wizard against an old school wizard, that old school wizard is going to fry every time. The wizards in 5e are just objectively more powerful.
Yeah,
but if you want a more team oriented and more flavorful and role play intensive one, I would go with 1E, OD&D, and to a lesser extent BX. To bring it to Sword and Wizardry, what I like about it, and I don't know if this is how it was done in the old school, but elves, right, as wizards, can only learn at most 5th level magic. They can't go any higher than that. That level of restriction actually makes the choice matter more, because it says, do you want to be a human and just go all in on the wizard, or do you want to be a fighter, magic user, thief with an elf?
That's pretty much the same in all early versions of D&D, where elves were level capped.
The
No.
thing to
It's
consider-
not even that they were level capped. It's a no. Even if it doesn't like they have the level caps as well as like it doesn't matter what level you are as an elf in like because there's like intelligent restrictions. You just can't learn like magic above 5th level magic. You just
They
can't.
did it in the form of level caps. In other,
I'd like to just
words.
jump in and let Omen jump. I'd like to give Omen
of course,
the chance to sort of say any
Well,
specific way that you like your wizards to be.
Oh well, I mean, to be fair on this is I like my wizards to be more utility aspected. Everyone always looks at I can cast this combat spell. Normally, you have enough firepower in there, but a good silent spell will immediately negate just about anything. But knock. Now we're going for first edition. If you go in first edition, knock is an incredibly powerful spell because when your thief cannot pick a lock, they're done for that level. Which means that they're done until
they're done for that one lock.
But I mean for that one level. But there's plenty of locked doors that they can't get behind. Now theoretically, you can hack through it or something. But knock really just allows them to open up just about anything, and you get that aspect. Comprehend languages, fly, spider.
I think it was Oasis of the White Palm where there's a room where there's a lot of pressure traps on the floor. The party completely bypassed that with a first level spell, Unseen Servant.
Yeah, and the cool thing about that Omenal with the knock spell is that there's like a level of choice that goes into that because the thief option is very quiet, but the knock spell, as soon as you cast that spell, wandering monster check.
Well, exactly. But my point being is that
remind me. I mean, because I know 5th Ed, the knock spell literally makes a knock that you can hear 300 yards away, but that's not the case with old school. It always
is it not? I thought it was. I thought it did. 1 second.
I thought old school allowed it to be heard throughout the dungeon level. Basically,
I'd have to reread the.
Yeah, I'm going through Osric. It might shed some light on this. Just give me a second.
Something I wanted to point out about the 5th Ed wizard as well, as DK mentioned that you like it for the power is. The 5th Ed wizard is designed to be a combat class.
Yes, it is.
Old school wizards
very much
not.
So.
They had fighting options, but they were not designed to like higher. 5th Ed wizards have higher hit points. They have access to a million combat spells. So a lot of them cantrips. So you're always just spamming cantrips and never running out. And it's designed that way because it's a combat system, it's a combat engine. Whereas the older system, the wizards had those limitations because, as you're saying, the utility is immense. One spell you can bypass a level. One spell, like I had when I ran Reptile God, the wizard in the group bypassed the whole first level of the Naga's dungeon with a charm person because they charmed the right guard, right? And then the guard's like, "Oh yeah, I'll show you the safe way through."
I'm going to say this much too: is while all the character classes are more powerful when you look at 5th edition,
right?
I mean that's
they're all combat oriented, yeah.
Well, yeah, but but the old version is, and this is what kind of aggravates me about the 5th edition spells. Oh, if I cast a friend spell, as soon as it comes off, they immediately know it.
They know it and they hate you. They're hostile. Yeah.
It's
going back to knock. Go back to knock. I've got the original first edition.
Yeah, Osric didn't say anything about it.
There's no noise in first edition, and it's got an area of effect, so it's not specifically one lock.
Okay. Oh, really? I remember. Yeah, I remember. Dungeon Minister say his kids did that spell and it opened multiple doors. Yeah, no, yeah, it's an AOE.
Also, it's like an explosive blowback kind of effect, didn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. If there's any debris behind it, it just blows it open.
It has a casting time of 1 segment, so it helps you can get away. It's a spell you can use to flee as well.
But you do need to. I'm just reading the 2nd edition version, but it does state that you need to know the locks used.
But that's specifically 2nd Ed, though.
No, at least for 2nd Ed, it just in 2nd edition it specifies that you need to know the locks upon the door in order to be to undo them.
That's a difference. But I want to go back to. I mean, I had got an idea of a bit of a structure for this stream to go through the various sections of D&D bit by bit. We have been
rambling a bit.
So in 1st edition, which is one I know best, the wizard was very much the game changer. The shackles were off in terms of a lot of the spells. The spells were much more impactful, but the wizard was a slow advancing class initially, needed protecting, had to learn the spells, had big limits on how many they could learn. Transcribing spells could be expensive. They had to find these spells. It was a sort of spell where it was a lot of effort, but a lot of reward eventually.
Yeah. And don't forget, if you failed to learn a spell you wanted, that was it. It was blocked. You couldn't learn it unless your intellect changed.
Yeah. Was it locked in first edition for until the intellect was, or
until your intellect permanently went up or down? Yeah.
Okay, because I know in second edition they changed that to your level.
Was it level? I was going to ask because I ran second ed for a while, but the way I used it was if you failed to learn a spell, you simply couldn't try again from that same source or mentor. You had to find a new source or mentor. I couldn't remember if I had house ruled that or if that was.
That sounds like a house rule because
I'm going to come on to second edition now because second edition added a lot of extra options for wizards. Now I liked those specialty wizards. The idea that you could be, for example, a transmuter or
a diviner,
I thought that was great. I thought the fact that you had opposing spheres, which you could never dip into. I thought that was really good as well. It allowed a lot of extra flavor. You could be the standard utility wizard in the middle, or you could specialize. And I thought that was taking on the illusionist idea from first edition. And
I kind of like the idea. I kind of like the idea of that these rival spheres. It's almost like how in university there'd be like different frat houses that would compete with one another. They just did not like each other. And so even in English, they're like Eton and what's the other one?
Oxford.
The other Oxford. Yeah, that they had these different frat houses. Like Lion and Dragon had a supplement where it lights out like these frat houses range from disdain and camaraderie to outright hostility. Like they did not like each other. So I kind of like that.
One thing second edition did do though is it nerfed a lot of the spells. It limited the maximum impact. A fireball now had a maximum number of d6 it could
really
use.
I actually liked that. I actually liked
10
that.
10d6 was the cap on.
I mean, you have to look at if we're going to compare the two. It got ridiculous that when you cast Meteor Swarm, the fireball still did more damage.
Yeah.
That's so. I had nothing against that. The fact they capped it because it was still 10d6 damage at 10th level. I mean, it was still pretty.
Still potent. Yeah.
You were fighting in. Once you got past 10th level, is when all of these spells. The spell cap really kicked in. Other than that, it was still very powerful.
It just feels kind of dirty because the wizards are already inherently kind of gimped that they have the lowest health, the lowest weapon proficiencies, they have no armor.
One thing a lot of people don't spot about wizards though is they are slow to advance to start with, but they race through those mid levels. If you look at the experience tables, they fly through the mid levels. Levels sort of 4 to 8, where they're one of the fastest advancing classes there is. So they very quickly come from nowhere to being the absolute artillery.
What were we saying, Sexius?
No, I'm exactly what I was going to say. There's like the wizards are going to become the artillery, and I think that by putting the limitations upon certain spells, that's fine. Because again, like 20 or 50 d6s, that's to the point of where it's just too much. You're already looking at monsters that are usually that are dealing in d8s for hit points. So anywhere between 6 to 60 points of damage for a level 3 spell. That's quite fair. That's actually very potent. And then you go up into the higher levels from there. The wizards are going to have. Go on.
Sorry, I was going to say the consideration there is saving throws because there are some spells like Omenel, I can't remember offhand because I don't memorize the spell lists much to the chagrin of my players. Meteor Storm doesn't allow a saving throw, correct?
I think. Well, it's been a while, but my real point is that at the higher levels.
No, I know what you're saying. But
it invalidates a lot of higher level spells, and so by capping the lower level spells, it opens up those higher level spells that then be.
What I'm saying is the difference between a spell that allows a saving throw and a spell that doesn't. So even a 30d6 fireball you're going to look at an average of what on 30d6 is what 90 to 100 damage on average, and then if they make the saving throw, that's halved. Whereas something that does comparable damage but doesn't allow a saving throw is going to have a higher damage, and that's why it's a higher level spell. So that's actually worth looking at, is whether or not
Meteor Swarm does have a saving throw.
It does. Okay,
in AD&D, yeah.
I get what you're saying though. Like if some spells have got no save against it, then yes, then at that point, at that stage, it has a much higher thing. But the majority of the spells will have some form of save against them, and that's just what we're going to find as a large rule within all of the spells we're going to be looking at. But I think we're getting too deep into the weeds about specific spells in this one.
Yes.
The idea is that the wizards are able to start specializing, which gives them I liked it because, as John said, because of you can now start having the whole case of you are playing the diviner who specializes in this. You're going to get one extra spell for your school because you focus on it. Is your opposed school, you get a penalty of minus 15% of learning those spells. At least
spells,
so you're just penalized in learning them because you don't focus on them, or there's such a conflict between the arts and the science.
You couldn't even learn the opposed schools.
No, you couldn't learn the opposed. Yeah,
second edition.
You couldn't even learn the opposed schools.
Okay,
it was every non-specialized. Like if you were an illusionist, every non-illusionist spell was at a 15% probability. Yeah, right. And if it was the opposed. Like say if it was a vocation, you couldn't learn any vocation spells.
Bonus plus 15 when learning spells from their own schools, and a penalty of minus 15 when learning spells from other schools. There we go.
Yeah, other schools.
Then the opposite schools completely
the opposite.
banned.
They couldn't even touch them.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to bring up one other thing: is the wizard specialists allow different races that were not allowed to become a mage.
Right.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No one could only be an illusionist, but they couldn't be any other class, any other wizard class.
Yes.
Right.
And so
like could dwarves? Was second edition where dwarves could learn to be, or was that third? That was third edition.
That's third edition.
So like invokers could only be humans, necromancers could only be humans, transmuters are only humans or half elves. So it limited that aspect of only.
And there were stat limitations as well.
Yes,
for example, I know had to have a high constitution, for example.
Yeah, but that's the same thing with illusionists, because illusionists you'd have to have like a 16 dexterity and a 15 intelligence bare minimum to even play one. So that's not entirely unheard of,
On the topic of second ed, how many of you are familiar with the Spells and Magic book, the option book?
No, I don't remember.
I've read for Gold and for Glory briefly about a year ago, so my memory's a little hazy.
That's a retro clone. Yeah.
No, that's a retro copy. So that doesn't.
I know. Yeah.
It's a really good book. I quite enjoyed the Spells and Magic book. I played the spell point system for a while. I wouldn't go back. I have various reasons I won't get into, but it's not terrible from a player-facing perspective. It gives a lot of versatility to the magic. Yeah. It makes it interesting. Gives you a couple extra spells, makes your spells malleable, like you can weaken them deliberately or overcharge them at the cost of your points. The two utilities from the Spells and Magic book that I really loved was first on the top of the spell components. It had a really good detailed list of spell components plus availability and pricing. So if you were tracking it, it became so much easier. So it's worth it for that. And also it had an interesting critical hit system for spells, where you had charts similar to the combat charts in the combat and tactics book for different effects of spells, and a metric for whether or not a spell was a critical and therefore double damage, or and then you had like, fireball critical, the guy is burnt to a cinder and dead, or an acid critical, he loses his arm or whatever. So there was there's a lot of fun stuff in there if you don't mind dipping into DCC and having a fiddly little chart to play with.
I'm going to say this much, since we've kind of, where does DCC fit in this? Because if you like that randomness and you like negativity affecting magic, so it's used rarely, even though it's very powerful, DCC really does a good job in certain aspects. I like the idea of Spellburn, where you lower your... I
think we'll discuss DCC towards the end when we look at other systems.
Geek actually played in my game where we did run DCC for a time before we swapped systems because it's just too cumbersome for me.
I like Magic in that, but one thing I'm going to say about second edition is some of those specialization schools were a bit of an issue. I had a player attempt to play a necromancer for a while, and certainly at low levels there was a serious shortage of true necromancy spells. It was difficult. There
was Chill Touch, Spectral Hand, and what were a couple of others?
A lot of those weren't in the original Player's Handbook, though. A lot of those came out of the.
They came later. The Necromancy
Tome of Magic and Complete Mage's Handbook.
No, I remember playing with Chill Touch early on.
Yeah, there was Chill Touch, but I think
it was Spectral Hand.
Let's go out and get another copy of
Spectral Hand was a second level spell, though. So
here we go. The second edition player is going to get his books. There he goes.
He's going to come with a stack of books. Thunk.
Oh yeah, actually.
Well, I mean, Spectral Hand was kind of cool because it was one of the few things where you could actually do a touch attack from a distance. That's why I kind of like that one. Yes.
I mean, that was the idea of that spell. That's why it was brought in.
I will say, Grumpy Old Slan does say, or not him, it was actually Alchemic Breaker said, in older editions, mages were the only classes to frequently unlock quote features at new levels in the form of access to new spell levels.
No.
And that is very true.
Spectral Hand was in the Player's Handbook. I've got it here.
Yeah.
Not entirely true. I mean, clerics obviously would have the same, and then druids had level class features. Then of course the monk had the what is more recognizable today as per level advancement feature was unlocked.
I mean, even the thief, the fighter at one point, the fact that his class features are magic items, and these magic items give him what we consider maybe class-based features. Like I can see through walls.
Fighter, though, that's
anybody gets that. But the fighter got followers and the ability to become a lord and extra attacks. That was a level-based.
And let's not forget, you also got a benefit of saving throws if you were a specialist. And if it was your opposite, you got negatives. I mean, I liked the specialist because it gave you some extra spells, which was nice, especially at first level, because you had one of them that was your specialty. You're like, oh, okay, I'll take this and another spell. So if you had it was awfully nice. But the question really comes down to is you had to pick spells that were going to be useful to the group. And I think that was the hard part of it is instead of having a mage which was well-rounded, you generally got, am I going to do this or this? Am I going to, and sometimes you get the party that did not like what you picked.
I mean, look at the spell list here. Alteration. There's tons and tons and tons of alteration spells.
Yeah, transmuters were probably one of the better options because you could do stone to flesh. You could fly.
There was tons.
It was nuts.
However,
but the list of necromancy spells in the original 2E Player's Handbook, there's less than 20.
Yes, but here's the other thing: is you don't get the abjuration. And abjuration is your protection spells.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's correct.
It forced.
You can't protect yourself from the stuff you raise from the dead.
Yeah.
I thought the second edition did create a nice landscape for the wizards in that. In having that whole school system in there.
Right, I've got a question for everyone here. When it comes to your wizards learning spells, how do you go about that? Because we all agree that wizards needs to learn spells, but how does that happen in your games? Is that something that they pick up the spell right there and then? And I don't mean they level up. I mean they have found a spell,
a scroll. Right, or a book.
When I run AD&D, it's quite strict that if you want to learn a new spell, you have to do it during downtime, back in a safe place, and you have to roll your percentage check in order to be able to do it. Yep. It can't be done during the adventure when you're out in the field. Of course, you can cast it straight off the scroll if you want to use it up, or you can cast it straight out of a book you find if you want to use it up. But if you want to learn it, you have to study it, and that is done when you are at home.
I'm going to agree with that. But here's the thing: it has to be done by research. It has to be done by either finding a scroll or a spell book. And that's how it was really intended for first edition as well, was you found it through the spell book, and that was your real treasure. It wasn't finding the magic items, it was finding a wizard spell book.
Yes. I never gave out free spells. It does suggest giving out a free spell when they gain a level as part of the training. No, every spell when I went AD&D.
Even in my 5th edition game, my arcane caster, he's kind of annoyed because it's like I want to learn new spells. I'm like, well, you have to find them. He's like, but it doesn't say so in the rules. I'm like, but
I get 2 free spells per level in 5th ed. Why aren't you giving them to me?
Yeah,
horrible DM.
And then I would point to the book and say, well, it's the purview of the DM how the game is run. That's literally written in the rules. So
I know. Well, you know what? If you have to fight your players with rules, maybe you need to. I mean, it's one thing when we're young, but as we get older, it's like whatever you want to do. Otherwise, it's just like, hey, you know what? We'll talk about it after the game.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, then maybe this isn't the game for you. I mean, that's the easiest way to put it. It's I don't.
Yeah.
Just say, oh, look at such and such page. I'm like, hey, man, maybe my game's not for you. Good luck. You know. And, and what's funny, most people back off real fast on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
they won the game.
For my first ed game, I run. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen my video on doing first level spells for AD&D, but I try to do my interpretation by the book. So, like, a wizard has to achieve his minimum number. So, if you have a certain intellect, you have a minimum that you know. It's usually 6, assuming an intellect of 14. So they know the concepts of those spells, even if all the spells aren't in the book. Like if you have your read magic, your magic missile, your sleep, or whatever, you have your 4 starting spells. Those are in your book. You know them, and then you have 2 more for which you know the concepts. You understand the mechanics. You just don't have the formula to cast it. So you already know that spell. If you come across it on a scroll, then you don't have to learn it because you already know it. You can just add it to your book if you've got the materials and the time, the ink and whatnot. But if you want to learn a new spell, then you have to make that roll. And yes, like Geek says, there's a little bit of study required. But if you already know it, then, and that's this falls into house rule territory, I guess. I also allow, if you already know a spell, even if it's not in your book, you recognize it when you see it. You don't need to read magic. So if you know magic missile and it's not in your book, you come across a scroll with magic missile, you don't need read magic to identify it because you already understand it. So, and the new spell per level that you get in AD&D what that means is you get the formula, you figure out the formula and can put it in your book. So if it's on the list of spells that you understand but don't have in your book, you pick one of those. It's not a new spell that you get. It's like, oh, I figured out the recipe. Oh, I'll write this down right away when you level up. So that's how I do that in AD&D.
I would treat it as, the way I would do it is like with a scroll. The way I would do it is, if you know the spell in general, you can read it on a scroll. But if it's in a book, I would say wizards would write it in, they would code it basically to their own cipher. That's what read magic is for. Mm-hmm. So you can discern what it says in the book. That just would be my way of adding extra utility to the actual spell, and I'd give that away to them for free. But I would also treat it as they'd have to do it in a place of safety, in downtime, and then just like Geek says, they have to do it from safety. They can't just say, "Oh, in the dungeon, I'm just going to read it while I'm in the dungeon." No, that's not.
As far as I'm concerned, if they find a captured spell book and they've used read magic or they know the spell, then yeah, you can memorize from that new spell book. So long as you can understand it, but not from a scroll. A spell book is different, obviously. A spell book is the recipe. A scroll is the magic charged into a piece of paper that gets expended when you activate it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I would allow them the free use of the spell if they know, like, on the scroll, but not from a spell book. Like they giving them the ability to just cast from a spell book, where everyone's like, no, you can't prep it unless you know how to read it. And if you don't know the intuit, if it's not your book, well, right, you don't know
if you're using Unearthed Arcana, there is a rule that allows you to cast from a spell book, and then it wipes out the spell book.
Really?
If you look at this, which is, and we're talking second edition, your check is made when you come across new spells. Whereas I think in first edition, didn't you roll, as soon as you gained a level to see which ones you could learn?
Yeah, like if you go to level 3, and so you get your level 2 spells, you got to go down the list and achieve your minimum. So if your intellect is 14, you got to get the 6 that and then you pick the one that is in your spell book.
This is all part of the bookkeeping that was expected of Magic
Wizards
players.
Yeah,
they were expected to keep a track of all of this.
And the second edition, you did it every time you came across a new spell. In there, and then you had to wait a level if that's otherwise. But that just meant that, and I kind of like that aspect better, because as you find the spell book, maybe you don't understand this particular wizard spell. Now you have to, or you're not, it doesn't click until you get your max number of level of spells.
We lost DK and Elfbait.
Elfbait. Sorry, I don't know. My internet was just being weird. I don't know what the hell happened.
Well, woohoo! I've got the right hand position now.
Well, I mean, I did miss out on Earth Arcana, but on Earth Arcana added the idea of the traveling spell book, which was something I did like. The idea that a wizard would put their favorite spells for a particular expedition and
leave the very valuable key spell books at home. Yeah.
Yes.
So, just as a side gripe, I'm glad you finally know what it's like to be correct on something.
Oh, don't stop.
Right. So the reason why I want... Oh, okay.
What's moving on?
Oh, well, go on, Sachius.
The reason why, the way I bring it up, because of the whole level part, is that I have a house rule where I say the player or the wizard has to roll a d4 and add the spell level that they're trying to learn, and then that's how many days of... basically each day they have to spend 6 hours studying that spell, because I want to bring out the whole thing of like, you don't just sit down and do it that day. Some spells are more complicated than others, and you don't have any immediate control, but there's a rough understanding that
one sec guys, I'll be right back.
The higher the level they are, the longer it will take. So
that's actually kind, because by the book it's 2 weeks per spell level, so you're making it actually a little faster.
Yeah, I'm making it a little bit faster, but my game style is that you are going to be moving a lot.
Right.
So it's like downtime of you coming to town and going like, okay, I'm just going to sit down and do all of this. Well, at this point, I'd much rather hand wave that time and move on to the other bits of you are now rolling. My players often find themselves like, we're now traveling over the hills and over here. And while we're doing this, I'm sitting and I'm reading. Or we're getting a card so that I can sit and read. So the wizards are the pompous, annoying friends who are like, I can't ride a horse and read at the same time. You guys know that. We must now go and hire these, in this wagon and put it in with pillows so that I can do this
luxury wagon.
Exactly. So that's what that encourages, and only then at that point, because again, this is what I'm like. I've got the actual calendar laid out. I then keep track of when this spell becomes available for them to roll see if they learned it. So it's not a guarantee that after X amount of days that you then learn it. That's when you roll for the percentile.
Oh, absolutely. Afterwards, yeah.
Exactly. And then I also enforce the whole, you've got a maximum number of spells per level that wizard can learn, regardless of how many spell books that you're getting a hold on, because I want to really press that wizard for considering what kind of wizards they are going to be.
I'm going to bring up one thing, though, and this is kind of not to be a dick if you're the DM, is if you're coming across and you learn your maximum number of spells, you depending on what spell books are available, they could be like, crap, I just learned all the crap spells because that's what I found in the books.
Well, that's up to the player.
That's the player, yeah. It's like you've reached your maximum, that's it, you're SOL.
Well, no, I mean, you don't technically know what your spells are until you read the book, is what I'm trying to say. So it's one thing that's what I'm trying to aspect. It's like, oh, I have these, these are, do you understand what I'm saying there?
I mean, the way I do it is you study the book, you know what the spells were,
what ones are available,
what's available, and then once you've worked out what they are, then you decide whether you want to commit them to your own personal way of doing
that's the key thing, because I have handed out the spell book of a hack, for example, where they got all the way up to like 5th level spells, and the players were like, oh, this is awesome, this is a resource pool for us to then pick from when we reach the levels to go for it. But it's not that, bam, I've now forced you to have all of these spells.
No, quite.
For me, I put the agency down to the players of saying, these are the spells that I want my character to have. I never force a character to take this on. But at the same time, I argue that all wizards should have read magic, detect magic, and identify as starting spells, because I find it just horrific that a wizard would not have that as a base level. If you've got any form of education.
Certainly, read magic and detect magic should be base spells in every.
I thought those were automatically.
In second ed, I think they are. In second ed, read magic and detect magic. If I'm remembering correctly. No, first ed is just read magic. Just read magic.
Okay.
I when I ran second ed, I made it read magic, detect magic, and cantrip. Those were because cantrip is your learning spell.
Yeah,
it's.
We gotta admit the cantrips were nice at the end of first edition and for second edition. I liked the idea.
I liked second ed cantrip. It was sort of the perfect mix. It was the general innocuous effects, but you didn't have to lock into an effect. Like first ed, you had to memorize a cantrip for each specific effect, whereas in the second ed cantrip, it's a great role playing tool because it's like, oh, I want to create a little gust of wind, or I'm going to create a fart noise behind the noble, or twirl his mustache around.
Essentially, it's the second ed. It's the fifth ed equivalent would be prestidigitation.
Prestidigitation, yes, exactly.
It's just a general utility, simple, basically parlor trick, or like a street performer type magic. That's it.
I mean, just using on that nerve quickly. My fifth edition group were using like minor illusion, which is basically a cantrip, but they were using that to then as a form of interrogation, where they made basically threatened a goblin that we are now going to light you on fire, and we will have this fire underneath you, and you will be in terrible pain. Give us the information. A complete illusion, but for a goblin, they believe that they can just conjure forth magic like that. They're showing it right there in front of them.
Yeah, I actually, in a similar vein, did something similar in the 5e game before I got kicked out. Like, it was kind of channeling that old school vibe of where light spell was an attack spell. We had someone bound and interrogate them. I just said, okay, he's bound up. Okay, I'm going to cast light on his eyes.
Well, that's true of blinding, but that's not a cantrip. That's a normal first level.
No. In 5e, it's a cantrip. Light was down.
It's a cantrip.
Yeah. They did it so. Yeah.
I'm trying to avoid talking about 5e at the moment.
I know.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
I want to try and keep us on.
It ain't gonna happen. It ain't gonna happen.
I want to move quite swiftly through third and fourth edition because none of us have got a great deal of experience with them.
Nope.
0 fourth. I did play 3 for a bit,
but from what I remember, my only real experience of magic users in third edition is playing the game Neverwinter Nights. And so obviously it's transported into video game. So all the spells that were in that game would have been the ones that were suited to video game play. But I got the feeling that this was the beginning of making wizards have more attack utility and slightly nerfing the creativity that was possible by codifying a lot more of the of what was in the spells. I mean, I've never played a wizard actually at the table in a third edition game, so I don't know whether that was the case at the table, but certainly from playing the video game with the third edition rules, that's how I felt. And I felt like it was the beginning of the idea of the combat wizard more than anything.
I'm going to bring something up. We talk about the combat wizard, and I don't know about third, and I'm just going to compare it, and I think sometimes people forget. If a spellcaster had a lot of time, and this is going to go back to first and second, as you got up in levels, you could cast very quickly and get 4 or 5 effects on your wizard concurrently, because spells were like I'm looking at Chill Touch in particular right here, 3 rounds plus 1 round per level.
Mm-hmm.
So that allows you to get a lot of stuff up, and depends on whether you want to say whether it was in combat or not, but if your casting time is pretty short and you're not in combat, you can cast these things pretty quickly.
You can stack things up, can't you?
Yeah.
And in third edition, you can have multiple concentration spells at the same time, like haste, fly, I think shield and stuff like that. It got insane. So like where you got, I think it's based on your level or something.
Yeah.
In third edition, like if you got really high level, you can stack all these spells. It got insane.
But I mean, I think it just lent because third edition was really the beginning of the theory crafting, late second edition, third edition, and that was where people started to come up with combinations that would potentially break the game.
White room theory crafting, basically.
Yeah, I think the actual in-game creativity was started to be lost.
Yeah.
Well, are we on to third edition now, or are we past it?
Yeah.
Well, third edition, they're already there was a major shift within the spells, just a general magic system. They did not put the same form of emphasis on wizards learning spells in the same sense. It was very much read magic. That was you understand magic, and then you basically had to spend gold to copy the spell from whatever the source was over into your spell book. You had no longer any limitations upon how many spells you can have. At this stage, you were looking at it opened up the doors for the arms race beginning.
Yeah.
And that again, like mechanically speaking, they were stepping away from AD&D and the historical, games that we know and that we played, and moved into their own. And then they basically went, right, we're going to focus on this, and this is how we're going to go about it. And we're not going to, have these other mechanics that will be used. You can see Omen is already getting out the third edition book just to check.
Well, no. I'm just, because I haven't looked at it, but I was just looking at some of the things of duration, and they have different things in there. And that's why I was just looking at it.
But
because there was no concentration in the first and second edition.
No.
I think what I had to concentrate on, but they were specific. It wasn't a general kind of thing.
Yeah, constantly. I will say that Raker actually does point out something that I think is very true, and it applies to everything post second edition. Basically, the 3.5 campaign he was in, spells are not very creative utility. They were specific use and very semantic. And I think that's actually the key point of why we feel, there's no creative use of the spells. They just read the rules and try and extrapolate as rules as written as possible. Yeah, in third edition specifically, because
that was
it just became an...
Go on.
Yeah, go for it. No, go ahead.
But that was third edition in a general nutshell. It was not about any nuances or about the interpretations and so forth. It was very mechanical. That's why it was very math driven. It's a core part of it, and that summarizes third edition. I don't
very much rules for everything.
Exactly. I think we can move on. We don't want to.
Yeah, we can move on. No.
And we have.
I didn't want to spend a lot of time on third edition.
No. Just the crux of the argument of what I was saying is just basically it always allowed the players to go, well, if you think about it, and it's like.
Anyway, fourth edition we haven't played.
We're not gonna.
I played one session of fourth edition, and I played. I'm sure I had spells, but they did not feel remotely like old school spells. It was all to
everyone had spells.
All to do with managing the battlefield. Everything was around the battlefield, and it was tedious. Wizards lost their flavor in fourth edition for me. Everything lost its flavor for me. Fifth edition. Okay, right. Where do we start?
First, right off the bat, fifth edition is a serviceable game.
Let's just
start there.
I'm going to kick this off.
Wait.
Right.
I think
one of the things
about third and fifth, because we're going to fifth, is feats. We all talk about the spells, but we're forgetting that they had a lot of feats for these magic users as well.
I didn't want to get into the feats. I really didn't want to get into the feats. Because it's a whole new can of worms there. And yes, I know there were lots of feats. You could do all sorts of extra things, and it was all to do with building a character and making them effective. And I didn't one thing I loved about the old school wizards is how organic they were, how they grew with what items and what books and what spells they found, and they were what provided the characters opportunity for growth, and it felt like the spells mattered. In third edition, it felt like it was very much it felt so much more robotic.
Because every wizard was basically the same, because they could prepare whatever spell they wanted, essentially.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But with 5th edition, certainly one thing I liked about old school, I liked the fact that once a wizard had burnt through their spells at old school, they had to either pick up their sling or pick up their dagger or their staff or hurl oil from behind and hover out the way and try and find creative ways to be involved. And that was the key. It wasn't the case they couldn't be involved. It's that the emphasis fell on the player to come up with creative ways to be involved.
It was
go ahead. Whereas in 5th edition, you've now got these permanently damaging cantrips, a lot of which scale. Certainly, quite a few of the spells, as the wizard gets better, even cantrips, as the wizard gets better, the cantrips can get better as well.
All the damaging ones, every single one of them goes up in damage. Every single one of them.
And it is very much a case of the whole system feels as though it's built around combat still, in that the spells are very, very strictly codified. A much higher percentage of them are focused on battlefield effects, very specific in what they do and they don't affect. It's like this will only affect a creature, will not affect objects. It's that sort of thing. It's very much that type of language now. I don't mind the idea of concentration to stop 3rd edition type stacking of spells. I think that's a good thing. But in general, I feel that they've retained too many of the 3rd and 4th edition style rules with regards to 5th edition wizards. This is the biggest part of the game where it feels as though it doesn't give enough of a nod to the old school for me.
I'm going to say something because we're looking at we have to look at generational aspects. I'm not trying to say this in a negative aspect, but when most of us were growing up, what magic did we have to base it on? Our magic was based on either mythology or based on Vancian magic or things like that. So they were powerful. Now, when you start looking at 5th edition, many of these players have grown up with the Harry Potter. And I'm not trying to knock this. And if you feel 5th edition to me feels more Harry Potter-esque. You can cast your spell. You can do this over and over again. And yes, there's some special spells. And I think that that's one of the things that sometimes, and I understand why they did some of this, is to keep the players engaged. However, from my perspective, there was a sense of desperation when the magic user had to get in combat with his dagger or whatever.
Yep.
It cascaded up that when he pulled out that dagger, you knew the party was in sheer desperation. Because
if the wizard was wading into combat, things have gone wrong. I would actually argue, though, Omanel, that it didn't make them more engaged. Because if you actually look at how, to me, when engagement is when a player is constantly thinking, when they're constantly in the tank. But here's the thing: when they're constantly reflective, going, "Oh, I cast this. Oh, I cast that. I cast cantrip. If they're doing that, they're doing this reflexively. They're not really thinking. That's where I will.
I'm agreeing with you on that, but there's a lot of times of, okay, I can't do anything. I mean, I understand this also, which is you have your frontline fighters, you run out of your spells. Now you're just sitting back doing nothing. You can think, you can direct for stuff, which, to be fair, every game I've ever played in, people are always throwing out ideas. So it's not that they're not mentally engaged, but they cannot really participate in a meaningful way in combat. Is what happened a lot of times to the lower level wizard.
Well, what you would do is you would load up the wizard with flasks of oil, and you'd set up ambushes, and the wizard would be the artillery. But this time, they'd be the one tasked with launching that flask of oil into the right spot.
Don't dump stat your decks.
Oh God!
Well, there was that. Well, the other part is you give them daggers and war darts and sling. Yeah. I mean, you would give them stuff where they could ping off stuff. But I meant, is that really any worse than the? Here's the problem that I have with 5th edition for this. In many cases, they seem to outclass the melee classes for range combat. It's like, you have a ranger, and you go, yes, but I can cast Hex Blast, and I can cast at this range. And the problem the other part, like you were talking about, is Charm Person or many of these spells that had an effect and they were long lasting. They're now like, I cast.
Oh, every turn they get a save, and then it's just done.
No. My point is, like, you cast Friendship. It actually works against the party for them to cast these spells. And that's the problem that I have with some of them is
a lot of the magic has been so heavily nerfed in how magical it feels because he's so continuous, and it has been the power level has been dropped for balance purposes, so that nobody feels overpowered or underpowered in any individual combat.
Well, I mean, it actually works against the magic user for doing creative attempts for their spells. Is my point was like Friendship. You cast Friendship, you just screwed the party. You cast some of these other, it works for this one. It's almost like a fast talk. But there's a lot of Charm. All of these spells which didn't have that impact before now are really, and they last a short time too.
If we're being fair with Friendship specifically, it was nerfed back in 2nd Ed, where the hostility effect came into play even after the 2nd Ed one. So that's always been an issue. At 1st Ed, the penalty was different. Is if they've made the saving throw, your charisma dropped by D4, but there was still no auto hostility. But I agree with your point, though. Yeah, it's like you've got this cantrip that great, I can get advantage on charisma rolls. But after a minute, they're now hostile.
I will say this now. One of my main, when I redid the 5th edition rules for my purposes to run a game, one of my main aims is I wanted to bring back that feeling of panic of the wizard in having to reach for, it'd be a light crossbow, a sling, and having to think about carrying a weapon still and having to use it because they'd run out. I want to bring that feel back into the game. So one of my changes, these are the changes I made to Magic specifically in 5th edition because I wanted the spells to feel more impactful when they happened, but B, to not happen quite as often. So cantrips, I limited to proficiency bonus plus level, number of cantrips per rest.
I do the exact same thing.
That was usage. That was usage, right? Not like what they could prepare. Yes.
Yeah, usage. Right. Yes, usage. The save every round effect on a lot of spells.
Yes.
The first time they have to save in order to try and shake off the effects, that would be a disadvantage because I wanted the spells to be more impactful. There were no free spells handed out on leveling. You had to find spells.
Right.
So you could not just pick and choose spells as you went up levels. You had to find them and learn them still.
And did you say you didn't get the benefit from a long rest until you were resting in safety? Correct.
No, for healing, I adjusted the rest. Okay. For recovery of spells, I stuck to the standard 1 hour, 8
long
hour.
Rest.
Yeah.
Right.
I kept to that for the recovery of spells because I did want to keep the characters involved, but I wanted to keep them feeling panicky, so the hit points and healing got stretched out a lot longer.
That's actually kind of fair. Yeah, if they can't heal, no matter how many spells they have, if they're dead.
Exactly. And I found that did enough. That did do enough. But there was one other thing I did, and it's just slipped my mind with regards to spells. And
the thing I do for my 5th Ed games, I just ported over the 1st Ed rule that you got to learn your spell, and if you fail, you're blocked. That spell's
that's in there. Yeah, that's in there.
Well, it was amazing to me that in 5e you can just declare, I learned these 2 spells. So at 5th level, I choose Fireball, and
the other one is ritual spells. The other one was ritual spells.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, I think you said you gave advantage or something on that on healing.
No, for clerics, for healing, I gave advantage if they cast them out of combat. But also, certain spells that were designed to be rituals could only be cast as rituals, and all ritual casting used up a spell slot.
Really?
Simple as that. Yes, I added that in.
That's fair. To be honest, it is just like, oh yeah, I'll just cast Identify for for an extra 10 minutes, and I don't lose a slot. That's ridiculous to me.
Identify would be it would take you 10 minutes to cast it, and it would use up your spell slot. There you go.
Yeah, and it was even like it didn't even consume the material component that you had for it. It just said that's the weird thing. It's like it doesn't. When it gives a monetary value, it has to explicitly say it is consumed, and Identify doesn't consume, which is always insane to me. Yeah, it's insane. 100 gold. If you just spend 100 gold once, and if you never lose that pearl.
The key then is, as a DM, I wouldn't allow them to have a pearl that was 100 gold pieces unless they wanted to go and buy one. There certainly wouldn't be one in treasure until they'd reached about level 3 or 4.
Fair.
And they might have to go and buy one.
They keep going. They go shifting through the gold, going, "Where's the pearl? Where's the pearl?" No. You could actually. I mean, you even have them like start scuba diving for clams to find pearls that are worth 100 gold pieces.
But see, that's the way it should be. These things shouldn't just be available. You should have to go out and look for them. And so, where's the pearl? Dude, you're in the desert. There aren't any.
There are no pearls.
There should be, unless you find a massive like underground sea where like that's connected to an ocean, maybe.
And of course, it's a role playing opportunity. You get to the town. Oh, is there a jeweler in town? Has he got? Let's go and see the jeweler.
Yeah.
Good evening. I'm interested in buying a black pearl. How interested are you in buying a black pearl? I'm very interested. Oh well, then the jeweler's like that'll be 150 gold pieces.
You need to find this treasure map for me that someone unjustly took it from me.
Well, no, I'm going to say this other part is don't forget foci within 5th edition, which removed spell components. It's a Harry Potter feel.
That's another thing I did. No. I removed the spell focus.
I will be a pedant. It's the spell foci only removes material components that can't be consumed and don't have a monetary value. Very specific. Yeah. So
the only spell focus I allowed to be kept would be a holy symbol for a cleric. Beyond that, the mages would have to use components and have the component pouch, and they'd have to. And I wanted to try and get the players to really pay attention to what was in the component pouch, but if it was a face-to-face session of about 5 or 6 hours, yes, they're probably interested. But playing online for 2 or 3 hours, they didn't want to waste the time really with that. Unfortunately,
that's fair. That's kind of an IRL thing, to be honest. So,
but so much of the things. The other thing I didn't like was certain spells when you go back to the 1st edition, like shape change. Shape change, you stayed as the shape change, but in the newer one, you get all the bonuses for it and everything else. And then, but if you lose your concentration, you immediately fall out of the spell. So there were some things I did not like about that aspect, which I guess is a balance thing. But I kind of like the fact of when you did shape change, you were a magic user in the old editions, you could cast spells. And they lasted a certain amount of time, which made dispel magic critical to have. Rather than just trying to knock someone out and say, okay, I did enough damage to you, you've lost your concentration, you're done. For certain spells, and I understand why it's there. I'm not saying it, but it's one of my biggest faults with 5th edition is that magic no longer feels quite as magical because there's so much of it. It's happening all the time.
Everybody has magic,
and if everyone has magic, nobody does.
Yeah. So that's part of the reason for my changes is to try and reduce the amount of magic in the world. If every city has got multiple people who can cast prestidigitation, there's no need for street cleaners. There's no need for public baths.
Yeah,
I would think that most cities would be on the lookout for all these people who can throw fireballs at will. You know,
yeah,
or even
firebolt.
firebolt. Yeah, exactly. Or
It's like that'd be a danger.
Terrifying.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, even like fucking the way prestidigitation works. Professor Dungeon Master and Dungeon Craft pointed out that prestidigitation can make a copper coin look and feel like a gold coin. Like you can completely destabilize entire economies by doing that.
It doesn't last very long, but
I know, but it doesn't. Yeah, but an hour. It lasts an hour. Like
I will say, prestidigitation is one of my favourite spells in terms of the creative opportunities for it. But yes, it does have game breaking
implications.
The question comes down for how high level is your campaign and how high level is your world, because that is going to be setting the precedent. So while we're sitting and saying like we might not enjoy the fact that 5th edition has got all of this additional magic, but it's based upon the fact that it's a high level setting by default, and as of such, you will have, you as a DM, you're just gonna have to turn around and just tell your players, don't do this, don't be dicks, because I don't want this to be an abusive thing that you guys are doing to my game, because then I won't have fun. Or if you find yourself with someone like me, where you go, I'm just gonna flood the market with fake copper coins that are gold, I will have contingency plans for that, like my church of taxes will show up, and it's an open and shut case for them, and there will be these things like there will be these things.
I did play the highest level mage I've ever played is a 5th edition mage. It was a necromancer, and I went into that game with the intention of pushing as a player towards managing my spell components and all that sort of stuff. But in the first 3 or 4 sessions, it became obvious to me that no one else in the group was really on board with that, which was that was a little bit disappointing for me, because I wanted that to be part of the way I played the character. But no one was really on board with that. But I still had fun playing that character, but it did feel at times as if I was going through the motions.
I'm gonna. Sorry, go ahead. I thought you were.
No, let's keep going.
No, I was going to say something, because we're all talking about magic users. We're talking about magic users and spells, but let's not forget the aspects of the character class itself of creating magic items. Which that's
woefully underused in my games. Woefully underused.
And I don't remember all the rules. I think in 3rd edition you could do it, but it cost you experience.
Yeah.
And then what was it? Is it basic or whatever? There's a certain level you need to be to start creating magic items, and that's one of those things that I felt in some ways that for a class is I wish that detect magic, read magic, and identify were class abilities rather than spells. Then it would have been an 8 for it and said, okay, if you want to do this, it'll take you this long. I just felt that, whereas you get the thief or other ones, the magic user, when he kind of went off, unless he started throwing everything into languages, pretty much he wasn't able to do much. Once you cast your spells, you didn't have a rest. If you were moving along, all he could really do was just observe and say things. And I think that that's one of those areas that if anyone's going to create their own magic user, I highly suggest giving them abilities, whether it's give them other abilities that they can use that don't use up the magic so much, that they can use their normal aspects.
I agree. I mean, my 2nd edition group right now, they've reached level 9, level 10. This is where the generation, the world has really opened up. They can make magical items. They can make scrolls, potions. If they have the money, they pretty much can just pull that in and create that. And I've told the players that I am going to do things such as magical items and so on will be a back burner, because the players are woefully and painfully aware that we have 3 hours every week to do things, and to sit down and say we're now spending a 3-hour session to play out a 3-month period. Well, there's too much that's happening in my world. Again, I keep the players moving. There's always something happening. So we do back burner projects where hirelings, NPCs, followers come into the play, and then they work in the background. It's an ability that I agree that they should just have, and I would rather give them and make it a background thing. And then here we go. Here are the preparations. Here is the math. You, as the player, you now get to do this role. These are all the things that your minions have done for you. You, the big boss, are now stepping in. You're doing the final touches at this point to acquire this spell, to acquire this magical item. And then that's how I prefer to do it, because I want to focus elsewhere. But I agree, as wizards at that level, you shouldn't need to just have like enchant, permanency, and all these other spells lined up. Make it something more. Make it something that they can do on work towards. I mean, hell, make it an adventure. Go out and find, the half dragon, half whatever. Get its blood, cut out its organs, bring it back. Wait for the 3 moons to align just perfectly. Commit to the ritual, and then here you go. You don't need the goddamn spell, because it's more interesting. There's more investment in making that magical item.
I can actually
get the magic users invested in collecting potential components and building up libraries of knowledge.
Or here's another way you can do it is if the magic user, right, say if you want them to be able to make certain magic items, right? Now there might be some ones that I'd say they just can't learn, like say class specific ones like Holy Avengers, right? They just can't make those because they're very rare or they're endowed by the gods. Say if they want to make like a +1 sword, +3 versus say trolls. If they want, they can find. If they find one of these, we can have them. They can learn the baseline of a +1, but if they want to learn like +1, +3 versus whatever, they have to like examine it and break it, or something like that, and then they can make as many of them as they want with enough time and enough money. Like there's like obviously every time they do it, there's a chance of failure. So every time they sink the money in, they can fail, but they can still keep doing it as much as they want. So that's how I would handle it. Where there's like a cost to it. Like, if you want the magic item you have now, or do you want the potential to make more in the future?
To me, and I agree with Saxis about this, making magic items should be an adventure to get the components.
Yes.
And then after that aspect, all this stuff happens in the background. And I think that actually encourages players to adventure more, or high enough level to encourage, quote, what I want to call ancillary adventure groups to adventure for you while you make enough money. Or it says the king's like, I want to make such and such item or spell. I need you to get these equipment for me. And the same thing, whether it's alchemist or anybody else. Yeah, I can make it for you. Get me this list of components. Go for it. And I think that rather than them just finding stuff, which is part of the problem I have with normal D&Ds, I'd rather them say, you have to go collect all this stuff, then I can make it for you. Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
I have my current players burning through the records and the logs that they have, because they are doing this whole creating a magical item, because the Yonti is an ever-present threat in my game, and apparently they're to stay in my players' minds. Again, I don't know if it's good gaming or just trauma. We'll figure it out, after some sessions with a therapist. But they're literally going through like, oh, we uncovered Hydra blood on this session. We got this. We got the blood of a troll on this session. They were actually going through and like finding out throughout the 2 years that we've been playing, they've accumulated a very respectable collection of mythical creatures, blood, skin, hair, all of these things that are the sort of things that you would expect to have. So they already have a lot of things. They're now going, what are we willing to sacrifice? And what will we need later down the line? Because not everything is used for just any ritual. Like, you don't use troll blood for the sake of identifying snake people. That's just
like there's a way like you go for it.
I was going to say learning the rituals for creating magic items as well.
Yep.
You could find a piece of a scrap from a mage's book, which says, for example, to make the +1 to hit +3 versus trolls. For example, you might find a little bit which says to imbue your magic sword with the ability to harm trolls in a greater fashion. Score 3 grooves in at the tip of the blade, and then dip that blade in fresh troll's blood.
Yeah.
At midnight of the new moon for the next 12 consecutive new moons.
I wouldn't go that far, but yeah. That's, or you could even do like if you had slain like I was watching a video on a module called the Apocalypse Stone, and there's a greater Medusa in that.
Brutal module.
Yeah. That if there was ever a module that was literally designed to kill players, it's not Tomb of Horrors, it's the Apocalypse Stone. But no, like there's a greater Medusa in there where, and it's like her snakes attack you if you're too close. She obviously can petrify you if you look at her, but she also has poisonous blood, which is if you make any contact with it, save versus poison -1 or die. And her arrows are dipped in her poison. So what you can use, like you can like for a greater Medusa, you can like extract her eyes, which is a very dangerous process because you have to like mount the head next to a mirror and start plucking them out backwards and reversed. You can use the poison as an antidote. You know, you can use the snakes to create venom. Like you can even use the hide, because in the mythology, Medusa hides were really tough to get through, or like Gorgon's hides were tough to get through. So you can like turn that into like a +2 shield or something.
Well, in mythology, like the Gorgons were immortal; they couldn't be killed except Medusa.
Well, because like there are multiple versions. Like immortal in Greek myth, because Zeus killed the elder Gorgon and used its hide to make his Aegis. So immortal is kind of nebulous. Like if the gods are immortal and they can't die, but immortal just means like long lasting, but they can be killed if they're like daimon or monsters. You know.
Well,
immortality.
The immortal needs to do it or special. Anyway, it's
yeah.
Demigods, which was you have to kill it on their home plane kind of thing. Yeah.
The next bit I want to come on to on this stream is, I mean, there's more to wizards than just magic users.
Mm-hmm.
More to wizards than just magic users. I want to talk about illusionists.
Ooh.
Well, those are specialists.
They were specialists, but in first edition they were more. They were a separate subclass.
Yeah, even their magic wasn't interchangeable. It was its own thing. Like a wizard couldn't learn illusionist magic.
Completely.
Different spell list. Yeah,
they were one of the hardest classes to play. One of the hardest classes to DM for. You had to have a player and DM on the same wavelength for the illusionist to really work. But if that happened, if those two aspects aligned, they could be the most creative, the most effective, and especially if you had that traditional gnome thief illusionist, for example, which was the sort of like the almost the traditional gnome archetype in
the trickster, basically.
Yeah, that trickster. And I would have loved to have played a game with an experienced creative player playing an illusionist. Sadly, it's something I've never done.
I am being terrorized by an experienced player who has got his hands on the various form of illusions in second edition. It's wonderful. It's terrible. I put it in your Discord, Geek. Illusionists are war criminals.
Yeah, I will say you need, for illusionists to work, you need a player with supreme creativity and a DM with an extreme open mind. That's the only way that they work. If you don't have either of them, they are just, in all honesty, a gimped wizard.
Meh.
Yeah. They're just meh.
Completely.
They're meh.
But if you've got those both together, I can imagine it being wonderful. Absolutely.
I am gonna need to dip out now. I need my beauty sleep.
All right, take
care.
care.
See you later, dude. Thanks for the contributions, dude.
Cheers.
But yeah,
and then there were 4.
I love the illusionists in 1E. Not enough of my players run them, although there's temptation. Like we did have one guy ran one, we only got him to level 2. But it was
guys. I just realized something. I just realized. Geek is the fighter. I'm the cleric. You're the you mages are the magic user, and Omanal's the thief.
I'm the paladin. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, sorry. If anyone's a paladin, it's gonna be me, dude. And you are not lawful enough to be a paladin.
No. I'm fully lawful. I'm just not chaotic like you. Go ahead.
One thing I noticed certainly in a lot of adventure modules, the illusionists were greatly undersupplied with spells, and there's one reason why I do like the UK series is that they reverse that balance.
They expanded them.
They use quite a few illusionists. Most of the UK writers. Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, written by the Brits, has got an Sambalay. Yeah, it's got an illusionist in there with an illusionist spell book in there. In the UK series, UK 2 featured an illusionist. UK 3 had UK 3 didn't. UK 4 had multiple illusionist spell books in there, and that's one reason why I like that series. But I'd love to play that series through with a character in the party who is
Daniel.
an illusionist. Hello, Daniel. With
Daniel,
who's an illusionist.
Oh, I thought he was leaving. My bad.
No. But anyway.
Well, here's the problem that you had with the illusionist is it was a premier class, which made it very hard to get anyways. You had the 50 intelligence and 16
dex. Yeah, I said that earlier. Yeah. Which makes sense. You have to have the nimble fingers to articulate, your hand gestures correctly.
And you have to point out to the players, okay, read the spell descriptions carefully because sometimes they differ from their magic user counterparts, like how mirror image works. It's different for both classes. And I think color spray really makes me laugh because everybody always gets it wrong. Because they've changed it when they moved to second ed, it was a D6 roll. Right. And it was like a burning hands where it's a little wedge coming out of your fingers. Where if you notice in first edition, it's actually got a range of 1 inch per level. So you don't have to blast somebody right adjacent to you. A 5th level illusionist could hit somebody 50 yards away if they were outdoors. And that adds to the utility of that spell so immensely. And it's not a D6 roll. It's based on how many hit dice you have, and that's again a common mistake. People assume they see affects 1 to 6 creatures, and they assume a D6 roll, but no, the amount of creatures it affects is actually based on the hit dice of the caster, with a minimum of 1 and maximum of 6. So it's read the description very carefully. That's kind of the thing with even with how a player describes what they're doing with their spells, like what we said, an open-minded DM and a creative player. If a player, right, is botching their spells, right, the DM says, well, it's not my fault that you didn't word things correctly. So, if you say, I'm going to create a pigeon for them to sneak into the castle, and you say, okay, well, they immediately kill it. Why? Because there are no pigeons in this region, dude. They don't exist here.
Pigeons are everywhere. I can say that for a fact. Everywhere.
Well, in a desert, say Saudi Arabia.
So were ravens. Oh yeah.
No way. Seriously.
Dude, I was in Iraq. We had otters.
What?
Slan brings up a good point, though. Here, the illusionists have a lot of spells with no verbal component, which is. That's a huge advantage because then if you're gagged or silenced, it doesn't matter.
I'm looking at them right now, and I'm flipping through it right now. And so the old one was hypnotic pattern with one of them, but that's a level 2 spell. So we're looking, but most of them have verbal and somatic aspects to them. So I'm not seeing a lot of them that don't have verbal. I see that one, but again. Some of the things are great, like shadow monsters. You have the big problem that you have is if you have someone that has a gem of true seeing or anything, pretty much invalidates a lot of the
or if your DM throws a lot of undead at you.
Yeah.
No, were undead affected by illusions? I can't remember. It's been long.
Do you mean intelligent undead? Like a lich or something, or like something as simple as a white?
Well, I mean, for skeletons and stuff like that. The problem.
I don't think they would be like if they're mindless. I don't think they would really.
It
that's
depends
actually a good
on your
question.
complement of spells, right? Color spray is not going to work on undead, I don't think, but mirror image certainly would.
Yeah, so that's
it depends on it's the nature of the spell, and it comes down to how the DM rules it in a lot of cases. So I just wanted to. I wanted to just sort of mention illusionists and how much. If I'm running an AD&D game and you choose to play an illusionist, I'd be like, yes.
You know what? I mean, the other spells like mass suggestion is it's verbal. Not my bad. I thought it said this. Yeah. But no, I'm like, if you want someday, Geek, if you really want, I can run Osric for you.
I haven't got time for new games at the moment, but yeah, in the future.
Maybe if you didn't stop running so many games and played some, you might have time.
You literally saying you guys up once you can play another. Yeah.
It was my New Year's resolution. I'm sticking to it. I'm sticking to it for at least this year to run more games.
Now let's talk about other systems and their magic. Because we're
hold on. I was going to come to sorcerers next.
Right. Okay. Right.
Now,
that's a 3.5 and a 5e thing for the most part.
No, second edition.
Where?
Second edition, sir.
Not in core.
Not in the core, yeah, obviously. But by third edition, they were a core class.
Yeah, third edition was core.
But there was a wild magic sorcerer in second edition. There was certainly one crept into Baldur's Gate anyway.
Wait, I thought the wild magic was wizard, not sorcerer.
No, there was a wild magic sorcerer in Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, but I thought she was a wizard.
That was the enhanced version, though. That
was the enhanced.
Right. Okay, my bad. I'm only playing the enhanced version.
Now the problem, the idea, obviously, the idea of the sorcerer is that magic ability has awoken within the character.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't need to study spells. They don't need to learn spells. They can cast them innately. They tended to have a much smaller range of spells, and usually they knew fewer of them each day. But they had certainly new editions. They had the ability to shape those spells. But the one thing that gets me about them is it seems they just have a higher percentage of battlefield firepower spells. They just seem to be innate artillery throwers, and thus they feel like the magic, the tactical magic user.
That just comes down to player lack of player creativity. It's like them turning the wizard into nothing but a combat.
I mean, if you look at the 5th edition sorcerer, most of the spells are very much battlefield spells, and it's all to do with shaping them so they only damage your enemies, and it's like an innate invoker. Is what it feels like. And thus the sorcerers, it's just never gelled with me at all.
I love the concept. I love the concept, especially because then we add in the warlock to the mix. You get these 3 arcane casters. So long as you keep them distinct, the wizard is the one who studies and gains the power. The sorcerer is the one who's born with it, and the warlock is the one who sells his soul for it, right? And they can each provide the various niches. But I agree with Geek in that, the designers of the game have emphasize the combat aspect. So any player who takes a sorcerer is just going to load up on the attack and defense spells, as opposed to
fireball, burning hands.
Yes.
Well, and the problem is that a lot of them are building their characters as they advance in level because they're limited in what they can have, rather than trying to do what organically makes sense. Now, I know that's true of like 5th edition, some of these others. They allow you to switch out spells to get up in level, but to me, and this is the way I played in 1st edition. Look, you don't have to memorize all your spells. Look, if you have the spell available, you can cast it until you run out of spell slots. And what that did is that encouraged more utility spells to be used than just everything purely in combat. And that's the reason I used that myself.
I think some of that comes from can be imparted on the way that the table approaches the game by the DM. If the DM presents and makes a point, especially at low levels, of presenting opportunities for the players to do extra things with the spells, or even says after a session, I put that there because you've got this spell in your spell book. If you'd learned that spell during the day, you could have really. And if the player's not grasping those sort of those aspects of the game so well, a DM can help
hint at it
with the DM's approach. Yes, if a DM is running a very, very combat orientated game, of course the player's just going to just write down Magic Missile every day, or write down Burning Hands every day, or whatever they've got to use in combat. But if the DM can create situations where there are real opportunities to use these a lot of the utility spells. I've mentioned it before on my stream. I'll mention it again, probably about the 5th time I've mentioned it. One of my favorite ever spell uses was the use of ventriloquism to activate a folding boat from a long way away, and they used familiars to drop the folding boat on top of Lareth from T1, who they pursued over land. And they'd found a folding boat in UK 4. They were now level 4 or 5, and they got the 2 wizards in the party got hawk familiars to hover over, holding the folding boat in its smallest form over his tent. Used ventriloquism to throw the command word over to the folding boat as the familiars dropped it, and thus squashed Lareth, pinned him under the tent.
So that's great.
So speaking of which, because that's the other thing that almost all wizards generally wanted, was the Find Familiar spell, because it gave them permanent hit points.
Yeah.
So they weren't as squishy.
But
yeah,
to keep
and
that
also, but because there's literally a joke in DCC I saw. Like, there's an image where, or no, not DCC. It's in AD&D where like some brute has the wizard's familiar at knife point, and he's like, okay, now you're gonna do what I say, and the wizard's like
one false
terrified.
move and the familiar gets it. Yeah.
Gets it. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
It's not good. It's not good.
Again, it comes like the 5th ed familiar always makes me laugh because it's, oh my god, there's no risk. It's like, oh, you killed my familiar. I got another one.
I hated that. Oh god, I hate that.
Whereas in first ed, you're taking a massive risk having this familiar, but the benefits were huge. You got the sensory abilities. Like if you had a cat as a familiar, suddenly you could see in the dark. As long as you're within a certain range of it. The toad gave you that wide angle vision. You can almost never be surprised because you can see all around you at any given time.
And the toad could actually swim. So if you wanted a scout to go through someplace undetected, just have him go in the water and scout ahead.
Exactly.
So you don't take your familiar into combat. That's a given. But
it's risk and reward.
They were worth it for the exploration value.
Hey guys, I'm going to use my familiar to go up to the monster and distract it, so I have an advantage to attack it.
There's the advantage of, as I say, first edition had a much more distinct exploration tier to it than 5th edition does, and thus Find Familiar had Find Familiar really did enhance that exploration tier, but it gave that sense of fragility to the wizard as well, because the wizard would be like have to think about sending their familiar into danger, because if the familiar died, then they'd lose permanent hit points.
Yeah, like I'm like I would look at that. Like that's actually kind of an interesting thing. If you look at dungeon exploration in old school, the way I view it is like a spec ops or like a brain surgeon carefully trying to operate on someone who's within a hair's breadth of dying. Mm-hmm. One mistake, and they're dead. Whereas 5e is, let's just take a sledgehammer and start beating our way down the walls.
Elfbite mentions the sort of filling the niche for that type of. Okay, yeah, I mean, yes, I can see why they created a class where the magic is innate, but it was the implementation, and that it became simply a battlefield flamethrower. In most instances, it is just a battlefield flamethrower.
One thing that I do to distinguish it in my 5th ed games, obviously I mentioned how wizards, I do require that they learn. Sorcerers, I haven't actually touched. I leave them alone because one of the class abilities, this becomes, you can choose your spell. So that actually helps, because I've had my players look at it. It's like, oh, do I want the wizard? But there's a chance I might not get the spells. But with the sorcerer, I'm limited. I can't learn new stuff, but I can guarantee the ones I want. So I think a give and take would certainly help. And yeah, giving the sorcerer more utility. Less common.
I would actually say it would make more sense to me if I actually would treat the sorcerer as like the demi-human option for Magic. Like that they're like the elves or the gnomes or the halflings. Like they're innately magical. So they don't need to study it, but they're innately. I would then like say, yeah, well, they're just capped at like 6th or 7th level magic. Like in order to understand the real deep esoteric ley lines of magic, you have to study them. And for sorcerers, they're just incapable of understanding it. But a wizard can, because they went through methodically with the teaching, whereas sorcerers, they're so dangerous, nobody would accept them into the academy, so they're internally gate kept out of understanding the deep mysteries of the world. That's how I would say it. And
I know. I wanted to bring up a few of the questions that people have asked in chat before we. Elle says sorcerer is like a psionicist, flavored very differently, but having the innate powers.
Certainly gives that
sort
feel,
of.
yeah.
Sort of.
Well, I mean, kind of, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, but the feel is very different. Larissa says, "What? I mean, I've seen you've answered this in chat, but what low-level D&D spell do you think is way too powered up? Well, it depends on the edition you're playing. They've taken great steps in later. They've taken great steps in later editions to try and stop any spells from being too overpowered.
I think
situation too, like we just
situation,
talked about,
yeah.
I mean, knock. Good God, you can open up all sorts of stuff, and if you as a DM now again, you are limited on spells, which is nice, but that's a huge impact. And the spider climb, boy, you don't have to worry about your thief falling off dead. I mean,
as I said, right at the start of the stream is one thing I like about old school D&D wizards is that was their ability to completely change a battle, but once per day. So yes, sleep, incredibly powerful against low-level foes. Charm person, potentially
very useful.
Game
changing.
Absolutely plot changing, game changing.
Web is a killer, especially in old editions
where you've
got Web has that suffocation effect where 5%
flammable,
and it's flammable.
So you just go, the wizard first round casts Web, and he goes, okay, I'm going to start prepping an oil flask.
No, I'm just going to sit and watch as they suffocate. And it's like, get my popcorn.
Well, I will say, I mean, we were saying about players reading the spell descriptions properly. The reason why my party failed A2, Secret of the Slaver's Stockade, they were caught in a dead end.
A web.
Oh. No, they were caught in a dead end. And they had, and the Marquesas elite hobgoblins had them pinned in. The party were battered and bruised down to low hit points, and with the elite hobgoblins were firing multiple bow shots per round, and were just peppering them from distance, and the party were just stuck. The wizard cast a web spell and enveloped the hobgoblins. The players hadn't read that description properly regarding, they could have just sat there and waited for the hobgoblins to suffocate.
And so they ignited it, thinking they do a lot of damage.
Instead, yes, within a couple of rounds, they ignited it, thinking the fire would wipe them out.
Right.
Oh, boy.
And
not
all
a bad
it did,
tactic, but yeah.
Very bad.
See, I didn't even know Web could suffocate. Right. So that's
let's not forget invisibility, which is what, a 2nd level spell as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've never played a magic user, to be fair, and I've never had to run someone who cast the spell. So
well, if you, and this is why I said, I like players. This is why, when people talk about sorcerers, I said they're irrelevant in my game because I allow wizards to select their spells. They don't have to memorize the spell that day because you don't know what you're going to encounter. And that's nice in some cases, and I understand why they did it, because that allowed magic users to separate themselves whenever there are multiple magic users in a party. But for me, I'm just like, why? Just what you know the spell or not. And I understand the Vantian aspect, but I hated that aspect. It's like
I
hate
I
Vance?
like it.
I like it.
I like
I'll-
Vancium. I love.
Finish your
Vancium
point. I'll
magic.
tell you why I like Vancian.
I just hate it. And to be fair, this is one of the reasons why you get other spell points, or you get like DCC, or you get Shadowrun, which I actually like that aspect of where you cast a spell and it can damage yourself as you cast the spells. Mm-hmm. So it encourages you to keep the power level low. Instead of trying to really, I could do this. Well, okay. Good luck. You're gonna destroy yourself in the process.
I will say why I hate DCC just before you go on, Sean. I hate it for two reasons. Well, one, it because the likelihood of failure was so well. One, I just hate charts. Like every spell had a chart, and like if you want me to instantly hate a system, you throw a shitload of stuff that I have to have prepped beforehand, and I'm like, I'm done. But besides that, it presented the sense where if you're a wizard, you almost never cast your spell, right? So your entire being is gone. Your entire reason for picking the class is gone because the risk was too high, or you got a high enough level where it almost never mattered. So I'm just like, where the risk is either too great or too minimal. I'm just like, that's why I like the Vantian system, because you have the spell, and once you use it, you use it. No, it's guaranteed, but it's minimal. But go ahead, Sean.
I understand where you're coming from. Is that it does that, but again, this is two different things. One is I think that they should have abilities outside of casting magic. That was.
I do agree. Yeah.
The reason I like the Vancian system is very simple. It's a game perspective. It has nothing to do with role play or context in the fantasy. It's because from a game perspective, it's very easy to track. From a DM's perspective, I've got my list of my NPC villain spells, and it's like cross them off, good. And it's an honest way to keep track. It's fair to the players. And likewise, from the player perspective, it's part of the game challenge. You have to think about what you are prepping. You've got all these good spells, but you can only memorize 2 of them. You've got to, and it's part of the strategy, and it makes it more exciting. I know a lot of players in the moment don't think so because they want it all. But it really does add that level of, okay, what do I have to prep for today? We heard there's a basilisk. I'm going to take Gaze Reflection. We heard there's a basilisk in that area, and that situation literally did happen. Yeah. And they encountered the basilisk, and because the guy had taken it was an illusionist, Gaze Reflection, they easily beat a basilisk encounter instead of being screwed by it. So that's that's my primary reason for liking the Vancian system.
And it's the satisfaction. It's a satisfaction of seeing the players have the right tool at the right time through proper planning, proper preparation. And I don't care, for example, if I've built up a session to have a big encounter and they've happen to have the right spell because they've made the right choice, and bang, it's all over.
And it's over, and they win.
And they win.
The I win button because they. So I get where you're coming from, Omen, where you don't like it for various reasons, and I used to dislike it myself, and then as because I used the spell points from second ed players.
No. I'm not saying spell points. I'm saying.
Well, I know. I'm just saying this because I used it because I got away from Vancian and was using the spell points heavily, and I just got so annoyed with it. It was like, you know what? The Vancian system is just so much cleaner and quicker and smoother, and that's not.
Well, I mean, it's the same with Elfbait. Even pointed this out. I like character options. Always have. I would rather have a tool and the option to use it than not have the tool in the first place. And I understand this like, but what if I don't have the option? That's why you either do research or you just acknowledge that you will not always have the right option because at that point, where does it delineate? Because you say, because when do we delineate? Because it's a resource. That's the thing. It's like, well, what if I run out of arrows as an archer? Well, then just prep more arrows, or just accept the fact that you might not have arrows. Like that's literally how I do it. Draw your sword, or run away and come back another day. There's always an option to just leave, cut your losses, and come back when you're stronger.
Well, that's true, but and we have to remember a lot of this stuff was done with Gygax, where they went in the same dungeon over and over and over again. Right. So and that's my point of sometimes I think the problem is we look at it not as
Oh, sorry, Elfbait.
but other things, and that was my point in there as far as I don't like sorcerers, because to me I just do it for wizards. Now I understand what you're saying with preparation. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. But the same point is, do I want the players always to run away every time? Well,
Not always,
but yeah, it's that's why they're going.
But you want them to have the agency and the wisdom to know when to run away and when to press their advantage.
That's a different aspect. Is that okay? Look, this is too much for us. Let's run. And don't get me wrong, I want them to run in those cases, but I also want them to go over and say, for me, it's okay. If you have 12 spells, I don't like the whole idea of you memorize X spell. And to be fair, anyone that's read The Dying Earth, they're fighters with magic user spells. They are not magic users.
Okay. There's that, but let's also remember that like you've often said to me about like with Conan, you can't one-to-one translate Conan as a character into D&D. These are obviously we're taking ideas from the literature and transplanting them as best we can in a gamist fashion. So
Conan's a dual class character. I mean, that's.
Oh yeah, obviously, yeah. If he's not a barbarian, he's a fighter thief. He is absolutely a fighter thief. Absolutely.
We are gonna move on to other systems in a moment. I just want to make one last point towards D&D, and that is and this is one thing. One particular adventure, the Mighty Tomb of Horrors.
Yeah,
it is a sign for me that I've got a thoughtful group of players when they take the first possible opportunity to rest, and the magic user realizes and wakes up the next morning, doesn't memorize magic missile, doesn't memorize fireball, doesn't memorize cone of cold, doesn't memorize any of those sort of spells, and instead picks locate object, contact higher plane, legend lore, divination, clairvoyance, clairaudience, those sorts of spells. That's a cleric spell, but
I thought the wizards had it too. My bad.
They might have, but that to me is a penny drop moment as far as a group thinking is concerned.
My favorite story of hearing that, not that I play them, but just hearing it was, so they play with a bunch of engineers. They went in and systematically dismantled the entire place. Like just took off the walls. They just systematically destroyed it and said, yeah, that was a really easy adventure because they're not trying to rush through it. That was my problem with Tomb of Horrors, is it was slow and boring in many cases because I like having the action aspect and thinking, okay, let's figure out how we do this. And if you have a lot of retainers, you're just like, all right, let's see what goes on here. All right, keep that door closed because every time it keeps shooting out a stupid arrow. It just felt. I thought that was one of those that should have been much better. I didn't like it.
Sorry, Hungar. Unless you donate at least another $1 or at least another $2, we will forever be awesome people. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm kidding. By the way, I'm kidding. Hungar, don't actually do it. I'm just trolling you.
Hungar has declared us nerds. That's what Hungar said. We are nerds. Happy to be a nerd.
Yeah.
Right. Other systems.
We are awesome nerds.
No, Geek. You can't be a nerd because by definition you are the old geek.
Okay.
That's
okay.
I'm sorry.
Now go and bite the head off a bat.
Okay.
Right. Wizards in other systems. I'm gonna. Everyone needs to drink now because I'm going to mention MERP. Wizards, or the mage class in MERP, is a very much a rarely played class because it is very the XP system doesn't favor it. The combat system destroys it, and
Jesus, Hungar, I was kidding. Fucking Christ, I should have kept my mouth shut.
We are double nerd. We are nerds. We are nerds now. Right, but also when you look at the spell lists for mages in MERP, you don't learn a spell. You learn a spell list. If you are a first level character, you can only cast the first level spell on the list. If you're a second level character, you can cast the second level spell and the first level spell, and so on down the list. It takes a long time to gain levels. It uses a PowerPoint system. Most characters will have at most about 2 power points per level. So you got a 5th level character is going to have 10 power points. That means they can cast 2 5th level spells per day. They can cast 10 first level spells per day. But again, spellcasting is very limited. But say, for example, you specialize in ice magic. These are the spells you get. At level 1, freeze liquid. Any inanimate liquid, 1 cubic foot per level, can be cooled to freezing at a rate of 1 cubic foot per round of concentration. So you can freeze a lake, but it's going to take you a very, very long time. Cool solid is level 2. So you can do the same to solids. It doesn't tell you what the effect does at all, other than it makes it cold. So as a DM, I'd rule that if you cast it on a weapon, it would cause it could cause you to drop a weapon. You get Wall of Cold at 3rd level. Your first Ice Bolt spell to actually cause any decent range damage is at level 6. So it's low.
Bidding war. Bidding war. Also, I'd love to point out Shadow and Sun's joke of he's a split cast nerd geek 10th level in each.
We are awesome people, and we are united. Yes, but I am gonna. But yes, that would make an awesome bartender, wouldn't it? Be able to cool liquid. But it shows that spells in MERP at low levels were very, very gentle effects, very minor effects, and there would have been very few high-level mages in the game. So I rather like those, and most of the lists were like that. I just thought I'd mention that.
I'm yes, bring up. This is one of the things that if we're going to talk about that, and I wish that D&D did more of this, even though supposedly they did have it. Though it never seemed to be used, was I liked the Conan aspect for spells, which is you
drink.
Can power.
Do we drink whenever you mention Conan?
Right. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Rather than a shot for your MERPs thing, it would be a sip of beer, because if we did shots, we'd probably die.
But no, if you're looking at it, I like the fact that as you gain spells, you actually your will begins a little bit different. I'm going to ask you after the Mount Conan spiel is don't forget about the magic users and Call of Cthulhu. But right now we're going to talk. But for Conan, I liked the aspect that as you gain momentum, and there are different ways to get momentum, you can make the spell more and more powerful. But with the complications, it starts warping you, very similar to what happens in DCC as well. So there's that negative aspect that comes into it. And in Conan, to get a spell is not limiting you to just one aspect. If you have a shape chain, you can branch out. So the spell has numerous effects that really allows that creativity of the player on how they want to use it as they go through it. It's not just, here's one thing, but I like the fact is human sacrifice. You can do this, and it starts powering the spells up. And some really powerful spells can be cast like once every 600 years or something, which is more of a plot device.
Yes, yes.
But I like that aspect, which is if you're fighting against, we always talk about our players, but let's not forget that it also encourages our NPCs. Oh, I better stop this NPC from casting such and such spell because it can light literally. I think I'm trying to make sure I don't get the Exalted confused with it, but it's almost like it lights a river on fire that can go up to 50 miles downstream. And you're just going, but this one can only happen like during a certain time when the Venus is in such and such spot, and it allows you to do those plot devices. And I wish D&D had more of those ritual casting spells that they had in there. That it's not just, it's going to, D&D is really intended to be, like it's a miniatures game. 5th edition is still a miniatures game to sell some miniatures when you look at a lot of it. It doesn't have to be played that way. But I wish that they did more of that grand scheme instead of saying, you know what, this character has this number of spells and just list them. So, I want them to be a little bit more.
I think that, I mean, the DM could sort of bring that into the game more. I mean, certainly if you've got a more of a low magic world, a quest for a lost spell that is really powerful could make a great storyline in a game. Wizards have heard that the knowledge to, I don't know, wish for your greatest desire is on a scroll in a tomb buried beneath the volcano in the center of the earth. And suddenly there are adventuring parties forming to try and reclaim that knowledge. Yeah.
Or they would say, like, if you want the ability to boil the blood of your enemies, you know, a very powerful necromancer would love to have that spell.
Of course he would.
You know?
Yeah, well,
go for it.
Well, like Conan has that in certain ones. And that's one of the things I like about that is I wish D&D allowed which we were talking about at the beginning, allowed that more flexibility for the spells and said, these are your boundaries, but you're allowed to do a lot in between. And it would, instead of trying to add hundreds of spells, I would rather them have a broader range of spells and say, okay, you know, you have polymorph. Well, that's a 4th level spell, but guess what? As you go up, this allows you to do this, and then this allows you to do this, up to the point you get shape change. And so then you only have to learn one spell that's maybe change self, and it has different aspects of it, depending on what level spell you want to cast it as.
I mean, I would even go so far as to say, like, I'm even half thinking as in, like, since I'm going to run Swords and Wizardry, Light and Swords and Wizardry can't blind targets. So I would even say you need to track down a high-level cleric in order to learn how to do this. Like, it's not common knowledge. Like a very devout follower of the God of Law could teach you how to do this. But they'd have to be like an 18 wisdom, as in they are so in tune with the transcendent part of their world that they're so in tune with their God that they're able to do this. You know?
But I wish that they would start
do this.
Collapsing spells and then give them different effects. That's what I mean.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like bundling them under the same name, but they do different shit.
Oh, or depending on what level you're casting. You know, we all talk about fire.
Right.
In 5th edition, you can say, well, to do more damage, I'll cast as a 5th level spell.
6th level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Upscaling. I know what you mean.
Yeah, and I wish that they would do that. And one is, it doesn't have as much, but it allows the players to go, oh, I'm not just limited that I have to keep learning the same spell over and over, or things like that. And that would actually help out sorcerers and warlocks a bit more, because they have such limited spells that I'm not wasting spells trying to do the same thing over and over again.
I think the utility of the warlocks is understated, because so many people look at the 2 spells and you know, if everybody's I'll just max out my Eldritch Blast, it's like, well, then you're limiting. I think the utility of the warlock is all the invocations you get, and you get these at-will abilities that you want to not all of them,
but a lot of them are where they can cast detect magic at will.
At will, yeah. Speak.
That's insane.
It's the at will abilities you want to look at and maximize, rather than I'm gonna take my Eldritch Spear and my Eldritch targeting and Eldritch Charisma bonus. So all you can do is Eldritch Blast with a little bonus.
The one they don't tend to take with the Eldritch cantrip stuff is the Devil Sight. So they can pair it with darkness, so they can do Eldritch stuff. Where I would be like, I would just take the
Devil Sight. The Devil Sight. Blackness.
Yeah, you can see in magical and non-magical darkness as if it were daylight. It's not like with dark vision where it's like, no, it just says you can see in it, because dark vision explicitly says you treat darkness as dim light. This just says you can see
all darkness is fully.
Yeah.
I know it's absolutely
so and. There's actually a funny way that I came up with, like when I was playing 5e. There's a way that you can turn that on your players. If you displease your patron, they can just say, yeah, you can see in all darkness, including your eyes, because your eyes cause darkness, so you can't sleep.
Oh, trust me, people sleep.
No, but I'm saying your patron won't let you, so you'll start accumulating exhaustion because you're seeing right through your eyelids. So that's fun.
Trust me, I have seen people sleep with their. It's a weird phenomenon.
Yeah, it's weird. But I'm just gonna say for the purposes of the PCs, they don't. So I'm just like,
No.
Well, yeah, you're punishing the player, so yeah.
Yeah, if they're basically doing things that their patron doesn't like, oh yeah, their patron's not gonna let them sleep.
Well, no. See, if I was going to do that, I'd just take away powers. Remember, your powers are coming in, and it's just like the old paladin. You don't just.
Yeah, but I kind of like the sadism. The patron wouldn't just take them away because that's too easy. A patron would want to punish their players to really make them suffer. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I think it depends on the patron. It depends.
Yeah, if it's a devil or a demon, oh yeah, of course they would. An angel might not, but if it's egregious enough, then yeah, the angel would. Like if you're like torturing people for fun, then yeah, they're obviously going to do this to you.
So Geek, going to come back to the point I was asking before, which was how much have you used magic in your Call of Cthulhu games?
Again, with I've said before in other streams, I'm not yet at the confidence level where I'm creating my own adventures. I'm using pre-written stuff. Okay. I've got an idea of an adventure I want to put pen to paper, but it's just going from the ideas, the happening stage is a bit of a stumbling block for me sometimes, or most of the time. But when it's been called on in the pre-written adventures, then it's come into play, and it's mostly been in the form of rituals that the party find, and I guess in a long-term campaign it would have a lot more impact if they found a spell book and the effect it would have on a ritual book, because in Call of Cthulhu spells are very, very situational. Extremely situational, and a lot of them are very limited in scope, and almost all of them have horrific effects on your sanity. So yes.
Sorry,
what was that? Sorry, I was looking at my phone. What was that?
Oh, this was the Grimoire of Cthulhu. So
my knowledge of Cthulhu is limited to the books by H.P. Lovecraft and not by Chaosium. So,
well, no, it's just referring to the how they use their power and things like that. And I haven't really used it. It's always like, do I really want to learn spells because that just means my character will just appear faster, But that's what it always comes down to. It's, well, is this a good thing or a bad thing? So those are just some of the aspects I was talking about. It was very easy to reference a lot of different systems, but I like a lower magic world, and 5th edition is Harry Potter, in my opinion, for the level of magic out there. It's common everywhere. They can cast spells a long time once you know it. So that's fine if that's the game you want to play. I want the grittier, harder aspect. I do. The desperation is there. I want players to be desperate in some fights and not where they go down, they come back up. And which is my real point of 5th edition. To get the game I want, I'm better off playing a different game. I'm not knocking it. A lot of people hate it. I don't really hate it. It's just not for me. So that's why I sometimes, DCC has its own weird thing, and I don't blame you for hating charts. I can understand, especially as they slow the game down. But I do like the idea of spell burn. I like the idea that players can burn health or
I did like that, to be honest.
A downside for spells can be fun, yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I'm not saying downsides, but the ability to power up your spells so they're more powerful, but you're going to hurt yourself in that term. Yeah. It also allows players to go, you know what? I know we're going to die in this. I'm going to do my last gasp of spell casting. Mm-hmm. I'm going to power myself up, and I'm going to die in a blaze of glory.
The one thing I will say that I did not like about Spellburn is that I think the way it's written, if I remember correctly, and I may be wrong on this, so pinch of salt, is that if you burn 20 points total of a stat, you automatically critical.
I'm okay with that because you're probably but if you're burning 20 points, your stats aren't even at 20.
but the point is, you recover a number. I think it's a number of stats, like a point in each stat based on your level. So you can recover 6 points in each stat.
It's 1 per day.
Is it not one? I thought it was like based on your level. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean.
Okay, that's much better. That is much better then.
But again, my point is that allows your magic user to shine brightly that one moment, and then just, all right, you're going to be dead after this, and I like that. So that's one thing that I wish that they had more of, is to allow players to really push beyond their normal limits, which is where Shadowrun does the exact same thing. You can kill yourself very easily in Shadowrun by
overcasting.
Yeah,
but I will say about to Elfbait, it wasn't being hoity-toity about Call of Cthulhu. It was more a note of shame. Because I really want to play Call of Cthulhu. Because I just never. I keep forgetting to jump into Geek's game, so it's a note of shame on my part.
And as you well know, Call of Cthulhu is the best role-playing game on the market at the moment.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so what's better? What's better than DK?
D&D, hands down. Sorry.
Okay, you know what? You can't allow him back on the stream anymore. If he's going to.
Are you going to deny the Giga Chad that is Gygaxian design?
Except that it's not on the market, technically speaking.
Oh, okay. My apologies. On the market. Okay, fine. If we're talking about D&D that's on the market, then fair enough. Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Star Frontiers I thought was far superior. Anyway.
I've never heard of Star Frontier. My apologies. I've never heard of it.
I don't
know. Not saying
it's
not good. Yeah. But no, I would also say, well, technically the OSR D&D retro clones that I play are still technically on the market. Technically. So.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, but no, I was just. I think I like that when we talk about desperation for the magic user. I also like the fact that, you can cast that one spell and you're going to die. And you say, okay, this is your one chance to go out in the blaze of glory. Congratulations. And that's it. And, what happened to him? Well, he overcast and he turned himself into a big, spot of dust right there.
Anyway, speaking of overcasting and turning into a big pile of dust, we have reached pumpkin hour.
Oh yeah.
Did we get all your topics out?
We sort of.
Joe, you can do Geek. Joe, what you can do. You can make a video out of it, and then you can have a very constructed.
Maybe.
I know. Geek, you have to understand. With live streams, you are never going to have the very constrained, constructed, and methodical approach you would with an edited video. You're just not going to do it.
We have been a bit more methodical recently. Just tonight we didn't go quite as methodical as we have been.
Because wizards, because just the very nature that they're spell oriented means it's way too.
And yes, it's because we did keep diverting into the spells, but of course the spells are the core of the wizard class.
And you know what? The fact that we were so helter-skelter with it and kind of, scatterbrained is very in tune to the wizard, because what is the most common archetype of the wizard? The absent-minded wizard. Yeah. There you go.
One thing we really didn't get into.
Tyrant, but that's just me.
One thing we really didn't get into is the usefulness of the wizarding, sort of hoarding and collecting various magical items. They are the ones that for whom most the best magic items, the most creative magic items are designed. And I had a lot of frustration in my teens when my friends didn't want to play wizards. They wanted to be fighters because they were young youngsters that hit things hard.
They wanted to hit,
and I wanted to give out wands and rings and things,
and Ogham stones and things, or Ioun stones and stuff like
all that sort of stuff. And it was frustrating because I didn't want to just. So I just gave out these items anyway and annoyed my friends because they couldn't use them. So there, you should have had a wizard in the party. So there,
you did have a wizard. It's called a fighter magic user. for the elf.
Yeah, but that's dual classing. They were probably playing humans for that 18 over 00 strength, man.
Multi-class. It was a multi-class, or if you just played the basic, you still had your elf that could do that.
Yeah, but humans can't multi-class. They can only dual class, my dude.
Yeah.
Who played humans back in the day? I don't remember anyone doing it because that was exactly it. Sorry. It's like, you mean I can cast spells? I can cast spells and pick locks and I can fight? Yeah, okay, sign me up.
I mean, the fact that the stream has devolved into a discussion of various spells at times, I mean, that is, to be honest, predictable. Because
it's still on brand.
It's still on brand. It's the core of the class is the spells, and they are defined by the spells they find, and the way the class has felt in all of the editions has been defined by how the spells have been written and how the spells have been designed and laid out and made available. And that's how the class has changed over the years. And as you say, he's become more of a battlefield wizard as the game has become, as spells have become more and more battlefield oriented and more streamlined and more codified, more attempt at balance. And that's where I think the wizard has lost a lot of its charm for me. Because I think as a class, it had the most charm, the most flavor of any class at the beginning. Anyway, I'm going to call this stream for now. Next week, we're going to be discussing dungeon design. So a complete change of topic. We're going to go over. So have a think about dungeon design, how you put dungeons together, why they're there, all that sort of stuff. And I'll be streaming again on Friday. And I am planning on doing something for the 2-year anniversary of the channel in a couple of weeks' time. So we'll see what we come up with. But thank you all for everyone taking. Do you want to quickly shill your channel, Major's Musings?
Oh yeah, well, I think a lot of people here are already subscribers, but
Yeah, I think they are. Yeah.
Come see the Puppet Wizard and see what happens. March 8th is my 1-year anniversary, and I will have new videos around that time. So get caught up, see what predicament the wizard is in.
And people, obviously, Elfbait's been here. He's got his channel up and going again. We've been having a few live streams on there. He had his first live stream with guests the other day. His first guest is sat to the side of me, and his second guest is sat in my chair. Who was the third person who joined?
Was it
Shadow? Was that third person who joined? It was Shadow, wasn't it? Shadow.
Shadow joined next. Hungar.
Oh, Hungar joined. Hungar and Shadow both joined. I'm sure they did. Yes. So it was nice to have a chat on somebody else's channel where and then we dived into Hungar's stream afterwards as well. So go check out Elfbait's channel. Squirrel Hermit's been making videos recently, back on it after his forced evacuation. Good to see. We've had the Crafting Gamer in here. He has his channel, Shadow and Sun channel, Hungar's channel, DM James's channel. Anyone I've missed? Anyone else I've missed who's chimed in tonight who's got a channel?
I don't think Saxius does.
No, Saxius doesn't have a channel. No, Saxius just comes in and tells us all what to do.
You've mentioned Shadow.
I've mentioned Shadow.
Yeah.
If I've missed you, I do apologize.
We'll just say a blanket for everyone who is in the chat and who's been talking. We thank you, and please, everyone, if you know their channels, please shield them for us. There you go.
Exactly.
Good night and good luck.
And I'll see you all on Friday. Thanks, chat. Thanks, panel. See you Friday.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Night.